The manhwa opens with a view of a twinkling starry sky and a mature man requesting another cup of liquor. The scene shifts to two men seated at a table, sharing drinks. One, named GWI Rinja, laments that he's waited decades for this moment, only to receive a single cup. The man across the room catches the complaint, labeled cold-hearted, even as Ryanji pours him another drink. He reflects on their first encounter, noting they were both young then, brimming with ambition and fire in their eyes. His expression softens, tinged with nostalgia, as he wonders where all those years have vanished. Ryanja refills the cup to the brim. His tone is steady, revealing it's been over 40 years since their paths first intertwined. A flashback reveals a younger version of the second man. He pleads with Ryanja to perform the art of regression to travel back in time. The seasoned mage is taken aback by the bold request. Further dialogue clarifies, this technique is the ancient heritage of the Gue family, studied for centuries and nearly impossible to execute. Though he could have perfected it, he abandoned the pursuit. It seemed an insurmountable challenge, akin to a miracle, to gather the 5 required components. Rinja permits a faint smile, agreeing to attempt the technique, if all necessary artifacts are provided. The first artifact named is the Thunder Bell, a sacred treasure from the Heavenly Wind Cult's temple. The second is the Divine Smoker, tied to the bloodline of the Divine Dragon. The third is a Spirit Carp core, aged over 10,000 years, an exceptionally rare item. The next item listed was the Secret Demon Soul, guarded by the Demon Cult. The man admitted that, of the entire list, he'd only secured funds. Everything else felt like chasing myths from ancient tales. Yet the man across the table revealed he'd succeeded in gathering them all, a feat that spanned decades. The final piece, the Demonic Soul, was the hardest. To obtain it, he vanished for years, with many assuming he'd perished in some desolate land. Now, staring into his bowl, he lowers his gaze, reflecting on his trials and wondering how he ever managed to collect them all. The one-armed man sips slowly, contemplating the steep cost of such a profound technique. It felt like bearing a curse. In his darkest moments, he'd even considered killing Ryanja. Ryanja observes him closely. He recalls the youthful boy from their first meeting. Now, a gray-haired elder sat before him, exuding an eerie, almost unsettling calm. He questions if this journey was inevitable, a path where a man transforms, hunting the unattainable. At that moment, Rinja resolves to ask, why does he seek to return to the past? The man grips his bowl tightly, slamming it onto the table with a sharp clink. Eyes blazing with rage and voice icy, he reveals his motive, a burning desire for vengeance. Rinja is shaken, his eyes reflecting fear and disbelief. Leaning forward, he wonders if even such power could make revenge attainable. The man's response is a resolute no. Ryanja presses, seeking the source of such deep-seated hatred. The man lifts his gaze, brimming with grim resolve, and utters a name, Wamuji. The name jolts Ryanja, it's one he knows all too well. Ryanja recalls, this man single-handedly annihilated the leaders of the 3 mightiest clans that backed Muram. Among them were the Alliance head, the alternate Alliance leader, and the heavenly demon himself. Wamuji was the most formidable figure history had ever known. A fearsome man, standing atop a pile of corpses. Ryanja, skeptical, questions whether he'd truly stand a chance against such a foe, even with time travel. The response brims with resolve. The man has no choice. He must kill him. It's revealed that the heavenly demon, felled by Muji's hand, was his own father. Ryanja is stunned, but the man clarifies his vengeance isn't for his father, nor for his traitorous brother, also slain by Muji. He explains that for those tied to demons, death holds little weight. When Ryanja asks the true reason, the answer is chilling. That day, Muji massacred everyone. Cooks, servants, even defenseless children with no combat skills. Even cats and dogs fell victim to his brutality. Ryanja is horrified, struggling to believe Muji capable of such an atrocity. The man retorts that Ryanja's disbelief changes nothing. In this era, he can't confront Muji. His only path is to go back. Before killing him, he wants to ask Muji one thing. Why slaughter the children when he was already so powerful? Ryanja studies the man intently. He asks if the technique succeeds and he reaches the past to fulfill one request. The man asks what it entails. With sudden gravity in his eyes, Ryanja says, if you find yourself in the past, seek me out. The man, taken aback, asks why. A bolt of lightning illuminates Ryanja's face, underscoring the gravity of his words. He declares he wants to be stopped from making his greatest mistake, marrying. Thunder rumbles, and another flash of lightning bathes the room in stark light. The man beside him furrows his brow, sensing the weight of the looming drama. After a beat, he chuckles, glancing at Ryanja as if expecting a jest before the tempest. But Ryanja's voice trembles with earnestness, insisting, "Stop him at all costs. Let him remain alone." The man, meeting his friend's gaze, nods with a smile, sealing the promise. Ryanja waves a hand, beckoning him to follow. The ritual's time has come. The man rises, leaning heavily on the ground, but stumbles. Standing is excruciating, his body racked with pain. Ryanja, concerned, questions his condition, but the man only murmurs that he's enduring. Missing an arm and an eye, he considers these losses a small price for obtaining the demonic soul. His eyes drift to the altar, where all the ritual's artifacts and components are assembled. Ryanja carefully lifts a carved box. Inside, the demonic soul glows with an ominous blue aura. Forming an ancient gesture with his hands, Ryanja begins chanting the spell, his voice heavy and deliberate. A dense, dark energy stirs before him. The artifacts react to his words, humming, vibrating, resonating in harmony. A deep, thrumming pulse shakes the world. Suddenly, everything freezes, as if space itself has shifted. Reality warps around them, and with a crack, a portal tears open, a throbbing gateway to another time. Ryanja stands awestruck, marveling that the ancient ritual has succeeded. Ryanja turns to the man, hopeful he can share in witnessing the portal's marvel. But the man is barely conscious, his body ravaged, movements feeble, breath shallow. Ryanja, torn between pity and yearning, gazes at him, then back at the portal. A sudden clarity strikes him. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A chance to return to the past, to warn and protect, for the clan, for their dream, for himself. Taking a step forward, he silently apologizes. He vows to find the man in the past and set things right, no matter the cost. But as he nears the portal, Ryanja realizes his legs won't obey. He's paralyzed. A sharp pain pierces him. Pressure points on his back have immobilized him, like a marionette with cut strings. The man's voice shatters the silence, laced with anguish and betrayal. "How could you, Ryanja?" Panic seizes the old man, his eyes darting as fear courses through him like venom. The man presses on, voice breaking. "You of all people?" He seizes Ryanja's throat in a rage, as if trying to choke out the treachery. Ryanja gasps, coughing, tears streaming down his face, stammering about the madness and his remorse. A flicker of pity softens the man's gaze, and he loosens his grip, as if accepting the futility of changing what's done. He admits the journey was grueling, a descent through hell to gather the artifacts, and Ryanja's act stings as betrayal. Yet a strange gentleness creeps into his tone. He confesses he's no saint either. Compassion is foreign to him. He cared little for others, driven solely to collect the artifacts. Clenching his jaw, he adds that if anyone else had betrayed him, he'd have killed them without a second thought. But with Ryanja, he can't. He understands the dream Ryanja has clung to since youth. He raises his hand, no longer for a punch, but to pat his shoulder, silently thanking him for these long, waiting years full of pain and silence. Tears come to Ryanji's eyes. He can barely hold back. And the man smiles warmly, as if he has forgiven and accepted everything. This moment stretches on endlessly, unspoken but understood by both of them reigns between them. And Ryanja whispers apologies again, realizing the importance of their bond. Suddenly, the space around me begins to slow down, as if reality itself is freezing, subject to someone's will from the outside. The man, alarmed, looks around the room. His face contorts with surprise. Everything is frozen, no sound, no movement. A loud voice breaks the silence, coming down from above, and the man turns his head upward. A deity descends from the heavens, a majestic, luminous, immeasurably ancient being. The question hangs in the air. Who is in front of him? The answer sounds calm. It is the one who is able to bring him back to the past. The man's face is contorted with doubt and hope. Too much is at stake. And he feels that this is not a dream. This is his chance. The deity speaks of the laws of heaven. Mortal man cannot fully understand them, not given by nature. Did the guy seriously believe that artifacts and a mortal body were all there was to time? True magic lay not in objects, but in sacrifice and pain, in the unrelenting desire that drove him through the darkness. Everything was a test, a life lived for a purpose, loneliness and loss. And the last, most difficult, was forgiving the traitor, but the man passed it, with such calmness that the god himself marveled. And now that it's all wrapped up, the choice is his. Can he change his fate, now that all the cards are revealed? The man says discreetly, if he has passed the test, let his wish be granted. Let him go back in time. Deity wonders, what exactly does he intend to do once he's back in the past? The man's lips trembled as he uttered, kill the guilty and save those who were innocent. The deity asks, is that all? The man answers, he wants a meaningful life, full of decisions made by himself, not imposed. He regrets his fate, and his anger at Mugi is just the tip of the iceberg, not the whole truth, but a manifestation of it. Too much has been missed, and now he has a chance to get it all back. God looks at him carefully without saying a word, and then asks one last question, not for an answer, but to test the soul. What exactly is regrettable? The man answers, absolutely everything, without exception. Since childhood, every step was decided for him. He never once chose for himself. He was commanded, instructed, forced, and one day he woke up and life had already passed. The deity thinks for a moment, and then a slight smile appears. Now he was wondering what kind of fate he would build, and disappears in a golden glow, leaving the man alone with his new opportunity and his expensive choice. His journey has begun, and now God himself will watch over him. The light disappears, time begins to flow again, and Ryanja is still standing by her side, whispering over and over again, sorry. The man turns toward him, hearing a familiar voice, insistent and sad. Ryanja asks, let him not forget his promise. Let him stop his wedding, as strange as it sounds. The guy can barely contain his laughter. The situation is absurd, but he nods and heads for the portal. Goodbye, he says to himself, already entering the open portal. And Ryanja, shouting, asks, just don't forget his request. Just don't forget. A man enters the portal, and at the same moment everything is flooded with bright white light. His eyes open. In front of him is something familiar and new at the same time. He is in the body of his old self, young, confused, standing on a wooden platform. The crowd is buzzing around him, but he knows this is the day of the kickoff. The man lifts his gaze and looks at the statue. Did it really work? Did he really come back? Something hangs in the air, a sense of power, something invisible. And then he notices it, the other man's gaze, in whose eyes one reads confusion, anxiety, and deep recognition. It was his father, and he stood there, not believing his eyes. The man smiles, not with words, but with his whole being, as if to say, I'm here. I remember everything. It's going to start all over again. Through the noise comes a shout, how much longer do you want to keep us? And someone drives a sword into the ground with a clatter. It means it's time to fight, because there is some kind of battle brewing. The boy clenched his fists, and one thought flashed through his mind. Now he understood everything. Everything was finally falling into place. Memories flashed back one after another. This is that day, the day the new demonic massacre began, the day that would change everything. The man shares that his father, a once powerful celestial demon, once made an unexpected announcement. He wasn't going to limit the cult's choice of heir to just his own blood. This decision shook the entire cult, causing a wave of outrage, because now anyone with enough power could claim the title of the next celestial demon. To confirm the seriousness of his intentions, his father announced the start of a competition between the heirs and X-clan leaders. He launched a brutal battle that was dubbed the New Demonic Battle. The winner of this duel had the honor of challenging one of the two sons of a powerful heavenly demon. And if he manages to prevail in the next battle, he will receive the fulfillment of one cherished wish, and the leader will be obliged to fulfill it. The scene unfolds before us. The enemy tells the young man to surrender before it's too late. The boy cast an indifferent, almost glassy stare at him, remembering what had hurt him the most. This type considered him weak and an easy target compared to his older brother. The enemy even bribed the cook by putting a special poison in the rice that dissected the internal energy and blocked the power. As a result, because of this sneaky ploy, he lost the bout that time. And when he tried to tell his father about it, he didn't say a word back. Moreover, the man saw in his parents' eyes only disappointment, cold and resentful. Since that day, he has struggled to restore his reputation. But time after time his efforts failed, and soon he finally fell out of the running for the legacy. This moment was the point of no return for him. It was where the real collapse began. The opponent asks if he's distracted, though he's standing right in front of him, as if calling for attention. The man focuses on him and slowly asks, "What was your name again?" The man is slightly embarrassed in response, then says his name, Gu Pyung-ho. The guy nods and says that he remembered. In front of him is one of the 7 disciples of the 8 Supreme, namely the bloodsword demon named Gu Chunpa, and Pyun-ho is his 5th follower. Pyun-ho chuckles and remarks that since his opponent is so bold, he must be confident. The young man lifts his gaze to his father, remembering how he hadn't realized it in the past, but now saw clearly in his parents' eyes. He knew all about the poison and was just watching from the sidelines, seeing if his son could get out. With the skills accumulated in his past life, defeating Pyung-ho without using energy would be an easy task. But he can't reveal himself. He needs to stay in the shadows for now, not giving away his full arsenal. Raising his fist, the guy loudly declares he will engage in battle with Pyun-ho without resorting to the power of internal energy. The audience freezes in shock, including even Pyun-ho himself, and immediately starts buzzing, shouting that he must have balls of steel. The crowd chant his name with enthusiasm. However, they didn't use his name, only that he was a consummate swordsman. It took digging through the original novel to realize that the hero's name is Muguk. Pyun-ho becomes nervous, losing the support of the crowd, and, competing for courage, declares that he won't apply energy either. The audience is immediately silenced, and then criticizes him. Without energy, they say, it will be uninteresting to watch. Pyun-ho gets angry, pulls out his sword, and says his blade will cleave anything it touches. Muguk, meanwhile, reflects on how unfamiliar his young body feels. And will he really be able to use it to its fullest potential? Pyun-ho points the tip of his sword at Muguk, suggesting he bear his weapon. But the latter remains steadfast and refuses, saying that it is not necessary. The crowd jeers at Pyung-ho, believing he has been humiliated in front of everyone. The boy blushes with rage and quits. He's certainly not going to kill the clan leader's son. But his arm is sure to be chopped off, and at this point he rushes in to attack. Muguk slips to the side, delighted at the speed of his new body's reaction time. Pyung-ho strikes again with another wide kick, and Muguk does a backflip, avoiding the blade with ease. The boy lands softly, with a slight chuckle, feeling the strength of his young body. Pyun-ho becomes furious and pounces again with a powerful overhead attack, demanding an explanation as to what made him so amused. Muguk notices the vulnerability and lunges forward sharply towards the punch. He drives an elbow into his opponent's chest, wrenching his guts out. As Pyun-ho's face comes forward from the blow, he throws a jab from the bottom, forcing Pyun-ho's head back and baring his teeth. Keeping the man from falling, he grabs his collar and proceeds to beat him with his fist on his chest. His hands develop incredible speed and punching power, followed by a kidney punch so hard that Pyun-ho flails in the air. The one starts coughing up blood and, weakened, falls to his knees. Muguk grabs his hand tightly and wonders, did she poison him? Pyun-ho is stumped, but Muguk doesn't wait for an answer. He hits his elbow sharply with his knee, breaking the bone so that it pierces the skin and the joints crunch. Pyun-ho screams exhaustedly, and the other fighters look on with real horror. Muguk, looking at his defeated foe, coldly pronounces that once he returns to the past, he will no longer let others decide exactly how to live his life. Suddenly, Father raises his hand in the air, and the entire crowd falls silent, holding its breath, waiting for what the leader has to say. He says he will grant him one wish, let him choose what he wants. In such cases, it's common to ask for tech or weapons, and most are sure he would do the same. However, Muguk follows the inner call and replies that he wants to go hunting with his father. Father is surprised. Even Pyun-ho can't believe someone would choose such nonsense. The clan leader, raising an eyebrow, interjects, "Do you really just want to hunt?" And Muguk smiles, explaining that he's heard. His father loved this activity when he was young, and now he wants to learn from him. His father's eyes warm, and he rises from his throne, saying they will set out at dawn. After these words, he leaves the hall, and all the supreme demons stand up to see him off. Muguk watches the distant figure of his father, and then he hears Pyun-ho's voice say mockingly that he doesn't believe in such a foolish choice. Muguk clarifies the name again, and Pyun-ho yells that he's going to kill him. The guy declares that he will no longer live by other people's rules like most. Once in his room, he looks in the mirror and sees a youthful face. He has indeed become young, but the appearance has changed so much that he can't get used to it. He thinks about where Mugi might be right now. If he can find the monster and destroy it before it gains power, it could be over quickly. But the trouble is that finding him is a nearly impossible task, as he appeared in Jianghu, as if out of thin air. After Magi destroyed the Murima Alliance, the Unorthodox Alliance, and even the demon cult itself, he simply disappeared, vanishing without a trace. There's no word of him now. But calling his name out loud to the world would be a challenge that would attract too much attention. Therefore, one must first gain strength to surpass Magi. At the moment of these reflections, a woman's voice reaches his ears. She is praising the fight. Muguk turns around, surprised, and calls her by name, Lian. This girl turns out to be his bodyguard. And her body is well suited for a job like this. It doesn't even fit in the frame. The guy admits that he didn't realize before. Her impressive size is the result of a special fighting technique that she mastered solely for his sake. This art makes the body as hard as a rock, but requires sacrificing appearances. She had once covered him with herself from Magi's death blow, sacrificing herself, becoming his shield in his final moments. Muguk's gaze grows softer. He looks at her with warmth, and she asks with a smile what he's staring at. He smiles back, saying he never noticed how pleasant her voice was. As he gets closer, he reflects that she was willing to die for him, and he saw her simply as a guard, as air that is always there and unnoticeable. He stops in front of her, noting that she's even bigger than he remembered, and looks into her eyes with a kind smile. She, on the other hand, confused, is trying to figure out what happened to him. The man recalls how everyone around her kept telling her she would grow into one of the world's brightest beauties. But suddenly the girl changed paths and went headfirst into the messy mass gathering, announcing that she would now be his shield. The guy at the time had no idea how much she suffered when she gained weight. And he didn't notice at all how her tear-stained eyes tried to hide her pain and disappointment. He wonders what was going on in her soul when she willingly gave up beauty. Able to outshine all the other women in the world just to be his protector in this cruel world. The young man catches himself thinking about how his attitude toward her has changed over time, and comes to the sad conclusion, maybe it was after her figure changed that she became colder. His gaze reflects deep remorse, and he utters a promise to spare her the unnecessary side effects of the technique. The girl anxiously notices oddities in his behavior and wonders if something is wrong with him. The man smiles, assuring me that everything is excellent, even better than ever, though his gaze is thoughtful. She notices the change and says it's like he's different. He admits that the change is real. The guy picks up the sword, as if wanting to demonstrate something new, unusual, hidden in himself. She asks him, where was he going to go so late in the day? The guy casts a sidelong glance, saying it's time to deal with the rat hiding in their ranks. A sharp transition. Inside the cozy house, the staff from the grandfathers greet the man. And he notes with confusion that he doesn't understand why they did it. The old man, among others like him, wondered, what is this even about? But Muguk is already squinting in the direction of one young cook, asking a question about the spiked poison. Shocked workers don't understand what's going on. And the guy immediately starts to deny it, saying it's not his fault. The man recalled how the young man had recently lost the 300 yang he had been paid, and now has to pay off debts that have gotten into the pockets of even his family and friends. The defeated guy lowers his head, confessing his greed and how he let greed cloud his mind, sinking into a quagmire of debt. Muguk clarifies whether he received this money directly from Pyongho's hands. The boy nods, hoping to be spared and not touched. And in the next second, his head literally flies off his body due to the swift sword attack. The restaurant workers look around in horror, while Muguk says with disdain that such an act is a disgrace to anyone, but especially a cook. The gray-haired man rushes to take the blame. But Muguk doesn't understand why he's trying to take the punishment for someone else's mistake. The old man explains that the kitchen is his world and he is solely responsible for everything that happens in it. The guy clarifies his name, Lim, and asks a rhetorical question. If his father is the head of the cult, is he responsible for everything that happens in it? Lim shakes his head. Muguk agrees exactly. So why does the old man try so hard to put the blame for other people's actions on his own shoulders? The man says no nonsense and demands to make chicken noodles. After all, it's been a long time since he's had this dish, which brings back warm memories from the past. Lim is confused and shocked that his cook's fate has been decided so quickly because of a mistake. And the girl next to him notices that he ate it only a couple days ago. Muguk turns to her, and noticing the interest in her eyes, smiles. For him it was many years ago, even though he looks young. The next morning, barely dawn, he and his father meet at the Heavenly Demon Pavilion. The father wonders why his son took so many things with him, as if he were going on a long hike. The guy replies that he just grabbed everything he could use if he wanted to stay longer. His father looks at him point blank, ironically noting that they only had one day's hunting planned. The man, without embarrassment, replies that he might enjoy the hunt, which means it makes sense to prepare just in case, how fate will turn out. The action switches to the hills and forests in between. This is where the hunting will take place. Through the forest path, they walk side by side. And the father recognizes the son has exceeded expectations and is hiding power far more deftly than he thought. He adds that if Muguk had told the truth earlier, a lot of things would have gone differently. Making his way through the woods, the boy admits he didn't want to reveal all the cards from the beginning. His father says he knew everything. The guy grins, saying he's not a cat hiding claws, but a predator ready to attack. My father wonders why the beast would hide its claws if its essence is to hunt. The man admits that he hadn't thought about it before, and now for the first time he sees for the first time in a simple question a deep meaning worthy of respect. The father chuckles again and pronounces that this is why his son is a cat. He then wondered how well he had mastered the soaring sword art. This style is passed down through the bloodline of the heavenly demon bloodline, and is almost equal in level to the techniques of the supreme demons. Muguk replies that he has mastered it completely, and in the same instant, he barely dodges his father's lightning-fast attack. The guy feels, one more second and he'd be cheekless. The father is surprised, sees that he is really telling the truth, not exaggerating. The young man wonders if his father struck blindly, not knowing if he would have time to react. What would have happened if he hadn't dodged? The father calmly replies that the son would then pay the price for lying. But if he dodged it, it means he really knows the art. Muguk says with a chuckle that a scar would ruin his face, and yet he and his father look like two peas in a pod. His father looks at him with approval, and the boy himself begins to wonder if he's being too sarcastic. The man turns around, casting his gaze forward, and suddenly he hears words from his father that he never expected, heartfelt praise. He follows, trying to memorize this moment as if it were something important that he would like to keep forever in his heart. Soon the father notices someone's footprints on the ground and examines them. And Muguk wonders where the latter learned such an art of tracking. The answer is astounding. His older brother taught him this as a child. The kid is very much surprised. He never knew he had an uncle before. And then, confession, the brother was killed by his father himself when he was about his age. The boy struggles to choose his words, but finds the strength to utter them. Well done, much to his father's amazement. The man continues and adds, if it wasn't for that fight, he himself wouldn't have come into the world. Father casts a brief glance, but continues walking without stopping. The boy reflects on the pain of that battle in the soul of his father, because the battle with his family leaves wounds that do not heal, even in the most resilient. He recalls pictures from a past life, how the strongest of men on the outside carried invisible scars on the inside. Dad admits, there was simply no choice then, and the only way to win the legacy war was to do it that way. Muguk clenched his fists, hoping his father wasn't counting on him to come up with a better solution if he couldn't manage it himself. The guy understands perfectly well and talks about, dreaming of peace with his brother is pointless. His brother is ruthless, and even the thought of a treaty is just a naive fantasy. The father's look becomes a little sad and angry, for he turns around and hears his son speaking unflatteringly about his brother while he is away. The scene shifts abruptly back to the mountains, where two men run up the slopes, tackling steep climbs and kicking up puffs of dust. Muguk turns back to his father, remembering how in his past life he never took a wife. And now a vague but keen curiosity awakens in him. What is he to this stern warrior? The young man makes it to the top and stands next to his father, trying to see if there was something special about this place other than the forest wind and the silence of the mountains. The older man points to his prey without further ado, and Muguk, wasting no time, grabs his bow as if it were his only chance to prove himself. The father glares at his son, wondering how he's going to hit a target he can't even see, and offers the young man to close his eyes, to feel the space, to become one with the world around him. The young hunter slowly closes his eyelids, beginning to focus and take in the subtle signals of nature, holding my breath. The elder explains that martial artists identify enemies by the vibrations of the air around them, feeling the energy of life flowing like an invisible thread that binds all things together. The boy senses only one movement. It was his father. And in his mind, he has an image of pulling out a thread of energy, like unwinding a skein. The man instructs him to release a stream of power in one clear line. Imagining that his body was a ball from which he must pull a thin, unbreakable thread all the way to the target. Gradually, the young man's energy begins to flow outward. A thin and steady wave left his body, as if responding to the call of a higher sense. Maguk feels the goal has been reached, and the flow of energy touches something distant but tangible. The father notices the concentration in his son's face and encourages him to analyze the object. The young man begins to wrap his power around the body he has discovered, and as he feels its shape, he assumes it is either a tree or something more living, perhaps a beast. The mentor advises to explore the space slowly. And Maguk, as if scanning everything around him, continues to hold the shape of the energy, not allowing it to disintegrate. There, deep in the forest, his energy touches a living creature with dense fur. The body is elongated, rough, and the image of a boar, perhaps even a wild bear, arises in the young man's mind. The father confirms, the boy guessed, it was a boar. And with a slight chuckle he admits that he himself would not have recognized the beast from such a distance. Maguk's smile glows with warmth as he notes that his body is as if born for martial arts, and such tasks are nothing to him. The older man looks at him with slight suspicion, not believing that the young man can grasp the most complex skill techniques so easily. The action moves forward, and now we are in the shadow of the campfire as night has descended upon the land. The father, looking at the meat on the spit, asks where his son learned to cook game so skillfully. The guy replies that he once read it all in a book. But a grown man notices that theory is one thing, but practice requires a whole other level. The young man thinks with a slight chuckle, over hundreds of repetitions, the experience already speaks for itself, and he's glad it looks so easy, as if it were a simple matter. He adds that he had prepared in advance the place where his father now sits, hoping that all of this would help at least a little to put the formidable warrior at ease. The father suspects that the son may have started the whole hunt for the sake of impressing him. But Maguk explains, he knew in advance that respect would not be earned that way, and he was not interested in the throne. A grown man, surprised by the young man's confidence, clarifies, "Why did you have to go camping then?" Maguk doesn't hide. There were two reasons. Firstly, he wanted to learn something that would make him stronger, and he already feels the result. The older man wonders what will happen next then, when the goal has been achieved and the young man is truly strong, capable of many things. The boy clarifies, he may be misunderstood, so it's worth clarifying right away that he doesn't need power for the throne, because his father is still strong and full of energy. The young heir is not about to waste years of his life in a power struggle. He is content to simply become a worthy successor in command of an ancient art. Raising his gaze to the stars, he ponders the need to master the 9 calamities art as quickly as possible, and even surpass it, for his father himself, in owning it, had once succumbed to Mugi. And this is just the beginning of his long journey to change everything. When his father asks about the second reason for the hike, the boy is a little surprised at his interest. A bright smile lights up his face, simple as that. He just wanted to be close to his father, since they hadn't had one truly private moment before. The elder smiles slightly, noting that such feelings could be the cause of death, but there is still a respect for sincerity in his voice. The guy sees nothing wrong in it, because he spends time with the strongest man in the world, from whose every action reeks of power. The father casts a brief glance at his son, then returns to contemplating the fire, and a barely perceptible nod is his response. Maguk admits to himself, he couldn't remember his father because only fear remained in his memory, and such memories have no real value. Now he doesn't want a repeat of the past. Everything he does is for his own sake. At dawn, the boy talks about going back, but his father cuts him off. They're not going anywhere. If he's hunting with a heavenly demon, he can't leave without at least fighting a tiger. Maguk is stunned, unable to believe that his father himself offered to stay. But she does not hesitate, and without further ado hurries after him deep into the forest. They make their way through the thicket until they reach a majestic bamboo grove hidden from view. The father orders the young man to close his eyes again and focus on his sensations. The target is on the right, 100 yards away, and it's noticeably farther than the last time I hunted. Now the task is different, to feel the wind, to pour your energy into its movement, to merge with this elusive flow of life. Maguk admits that in all his martial arts training, he never once thought of channeling energy into the wind. After all, no one had taught him such a thing, and no art he knew of included such a technique. Father tells me to act as before, releasing the power slowly, carefully, like a cloth that cannot be torn. If a young man intends to apply this in a real battle, he must learn to release energy as quickly and accurately as possible. Maguk concentrates, the energy in his body becoming denser and sharper. He begins to catch the movement of the air, trying to connect his power to it. The young man faces a difficulty. The streams are too different, but continues to find a rhythm, adapting to the wind like a dance that requires a precise step. And then, at some point, a realization comes. Merging is not just moving downwind, it's intertwining, as in a knotted rope. The energy rushes through the forest, obeying the wind until it hits its target, where the tiger hides, looking in his direction with wild wariness. The guy is stunned, and his heart sinks. This is a real beast, not just a shadow or an image created by imagination. His father is surprised too, noticing how his son's face has changed, and warns him, relaxing in this kind of training could cost lives. The more energy lines a young man can control, the better his chances of surviving a real battle, where mistakes are not forgiven. Later, as evening descends on the camp, Maguk pulls out a bottle of alcohol and says it's his secret weapon, the main tool in reserve. Dad takes a sip and he's okay, professional drunk on the spot. Now it's the kid's turn, and he takes a sip and almost chokes, realizing it's more combustible than regular wine. So strong it is. The guy remarks with a chuckle that it's too strong for him, though inwardly he realizes he said the wrong thing, and in fact he's been used to this kind of thing for a long time. Father only shakes his head, stating that demon masters don't complain about hard liquor, and if you're one of them, you should drink like one. Maguk parries, perhaps his liver is weak, but the main thing is in the heart, not in the stomach, because anger is not born from wine, but from choosing the path. The father suddenly asks an unexpected question. Could his son kill him for his own survival? The guy replies that no, because how can you kill someone who gave you life? Even though he realizes it's a lie. If the situation demanded it, he would do it. After all, there is no room for emotion in such things, only a choice between life and death. This was the first real conversation between them, and he can't put someone else's life before his own, even if it is his father's. Maguk wonders if his father could kill him back. And the man, taking another sip, quiets down. If in doubt, your heart is still soft. The young man looks down, thinking aloud that he should probably learn how to drink that damn alcohol if he wants to get stronger. After which he drains the bowl in a gulp. And there is an expression on my father's face that he probably didn't expect himself, almost tender, caring. Later, in Maguk's home, we see the young warrior with a tense face immersed in training, trying to learn how to spread the aura around him with the utmost precision and control. The guy inhales deeply, letting the energy flow through his body, realizing that after days of grueling exercise, he had finally learned to channel his power into the flow of the wind, allowing it to move freely and steadily. Now it can hold 3 or even 4 streams at the same time, which is a major step forward. The man never thought his father would ever teach him how to release energy outside of his body. It felt almost like a second life. Thanks to this ability, he is now able to sense in advance the enemy lurking nearby and preparing to attack. If he continues practicing and increases the load, one day he will be able to control more than 10 streams at a time. Perhaps his skill will reach the point where he can completely suppress any stealthy and insidious techniques. A young man makes a decision to become stronger than he has ever been, and a new determination ignites within him. He recalls how even his father, a martial artist of a much higher level, fell in battle against Magi, all because the Sky Demon Pavilion was destroyed from the inside, not the outside. This place wasn't just heavily guarded. There were 3 barrier formations, 6 traps created by ancient masters, and select elite fighters. Not to mention the 8 supreme demons stationed around the perimeter and guarding the pavilion. The northern border was guarded by the demonic swordsmen of the Northern Heaven clan, led by a sword master nicknamed One Slit. On the southern borders stood the Blades of Southern Heaven, members of the demonic sword family. And leading them was the same bloodsword Chimpa mentioned earlier among the great fighters. The eastern part was put under the protection of Iron Fist, the leader of the Eastern Fist faction, known as the Demon Fist. The west was shrouded in illusions, controlled by a master surnamed Demon Thief of Souls, creator of illusionary formations. The northeast was under the control of the faceless swordsman, led by the grimly intimidating demon of sinister smile. The southeastern side was defended by drunken swordsmen whose movements were unpredictable, and they were commanded by the demonic drunkard. The southwestern regions belonged to the Poisoned Fangs, a clan known for their art of poisons, at the head of which stood the Poison King, who knew no equal in the alchemy of death. And the northwest was inhabited by mad monks who worshipped the demonic Buddha, proving that there were demons in those places in abundance, and each was more dangerous than the other. Earlier, the guy was sure that Magi had infiltrated from the outside by breaching the outer perimeter. But that turned out to be a lie. Not a single line of defense had been breached. Someone had let Magi inside on his own, betraying his master. The man is now certain that it was someone among the 8 Supreme who turned out to be the traitor, betraying the culture and the family. And it probably wasn't just one person. The culprits were never found. But the guy doesn't care anymore who exactly committed the betrayal, because to him, all 8 of them have become traitors. After the death of their father, neither of them fought for justice, neither of them wished for revenge. They simply left the pavilion and closed the cult, as if they had forgotten everything it meant to them. Although the events happened later, the young man knew too much about them, as if he had experienced it himself. He knew how they lived, how they hid, how they died without leaving a trace of honor behind them. Immersed in his thoughts, he continues forward, preparing for the task ahead. And within him a new determination dawns, to use all 8 Supremes for his own purposes. Walking up to the door, the guy hears someone laughing loudly at AVN, making silly jokes about her fat ass, and wonders if Maguk is in the hall right now, as if not noticing her presence. It turned out to be a bald man who began to wonder how many days the man had been locked up. He says it was long overdue to come out, and is surprised that Maguk hasn't shown up until now. AVN reacts painfully to his barbed words and wonders sharply what nonsense he is talking about. Turning around, she is surprised to notice that Maguk is actually out. And he, not hiding his displeasure, tells her that he asked her to take care of business while he's practicing and not to hang around doing nothing. The bald man is happy that the man has finally shown up and asks why the man has been locked up for so long. He calls himself Chimpa's disciple. The guy adds that just like Pianho, his name is Janpo, and that name already carries a challenge. You could say he's being defiant solely because of his father and his words. After my father announced that anyone from the cult could be the heir. The very title of a heavenly demon's son was no longer a privilege, but a burden. On the contrary, it only fueled the ambitions of the other disciples who wanted to surpass him at all costs. Maguk turns to Janpo, asking what he is trying to accomplish. The latter accuses him of not being able to practice martial arts anymore because of him. Bald Devil says he's not kidding, and he should have been more serious. Maguk remarks with a chuckle that he's not going to run after him with consolations. Janpo takes it seriously. However, Maguk coldly replies that they are not close enough to talk about someone's pain frankly. Janpo becomes angry, claiming that Maguk owes him an apology and responsibility. But Maguk sees right through it. He doesn't need a conversation. It's just a way to make himself look like a hero. He realizes that Janpo wants a formal apology, so he can use it to his advantage, so he can brag later as if he defended his teacher's honor in front of everyone. The disciples try to show their loyalty to the master, but Janpo wants his apology to be a public act and give him an advantage in the eyes of others. Maguk chuckles, saying that it's unlikely their teacher would pick the best student based on such a ridiculous criterion. Janpo starts to panic, saying that he's here solely for Bianho, not for fame. Maguk abruptly interrupts the conversation. That's enough. His gaze turns cold and prickly now. He demands an apology. Janpo is stunned, not understanding what exactly he should apologize for, and gets a response for insults said to Maguk's subordinate. AVN tries to say it's okay, but Maguk interrupts her. He, unlike her, couldn't care less. She's at a loss for words, not knowing what to say. And the guy continues by pointing out that Janpo crossed the line by humiliating his subordinate. He demands that he get on his knees and apologize to her, without compromise or excuses. Janpo snorts disdainfully, grinning. He has no intention of kneeling before this pig. Maguk holds back, but the rage builds. The guy is out of line again. Janpo declares that he would rather die than humiliate himself in front of her. Maguk frowns then, and after making sure the man is sure of his statement, grants him his wish, his hand reaching for his sword. He pulls it from its sheath, and the gleam of the murderous metal brightens everyone around him. AVN is dumbfounded, Jampo is distraught. He asks if Maguk has gone mad. The answer is only a cold stare. The guy points his sword at him, confidently saying, either kneel or fight. Let him choose. Let Yimpa know. His master would not approve of cowardice if he ran away from a fight. Their conversation can be heard even on his face. Jampo is stunned. Why would Maguk go this far? But he didn't care. If Jampo came for revenge, fine, but no one would allow his people to be humiliated. AVN still can't believe how much Maguk has changed in the last few days. Jampo chuckles, asking if he's really willing to kill him over a piggy. The answer is simple. Yes, he cares about her. He pulls his sword from his shoulder, preparing for a duel. And his comrades rush to stop him. They feel this could end badly. AVN also tries to hold Maguk back, begging him not to get involved in the fight, but he doesn't listen to her. It's settled. They stand face to face like participants in a deadly arena, ready for the last round. Jampo mockingly says that he will limit himself to chopping off his hand, which is his gift to the demon's son. He takes a swing with his huge sword, and everyone around me freezes without taking their eyes off it. Jampo rushes forward, swinging wildly with all his might. But Maguk easily moves out of range of the punch without getting a scratch on it, and with one precise attack, plunges his sword into his opponent's head. Blood is spurting. Everyone's in shock. Again, the kid kills another opponent in his path. Maguk pronounces death was a punishment for language. Subordinates must not be insulted. He looks at Yampa's body and says that he had a chance to apologize, but he didn't take it. The guy takes the blade out of his mouth, and the blood spurting from it splatters all over the yard, staining the air scarlet. Yangpo's lifeless body begins to settle down as if devoid of any will and spirit, slowly crumbling to the ground. And Maguk looks at him with icy contempt, as if he were not a man but a pathetic nothing, crushed without regret. Yangpo's companions rush towards him, shouting his name with a desperation that pierces the silence, tearing the air with a pitiful echo. And one of them asks Maguk if he's sure he's ready to suffer the consequences for what he did without hesitation or doubt. The guy replies that if they don't shut up, the same fate, death, awaits them, and orders them to pass it on word for word. And he adds that if anyone dares to twist his words, he himself will find each one and deal with him without hesitation or pity. Those carry Yangpo's body away, not daring to interrupt, and Ong asks the man with concern in his voice why he did it. The man doesn't understand what she's getting at and stares at her, as if the question sounds meaningless and irrelevant. She clarifies why he would do such a thing for her, risking himself as if her fate were more important than his own life. He says that even though she's suffering herself, she still continues to worry about him, and it hasn't escaped his notice, and adds that it's not about her at all. He just killed someone he felt deserved to die without the right to redemption. She says that Shinpo will not just leave it at that, for his pride is strong and his anger even stronger. The man ponders and agrees. It is logical to be afraid in such a situation, because the enemy is strong and cunning. He says that all 8 demon lords have immense power and influence that can change the course of history, and their followers were personalities that even his father preferred not to mess with so as not to risk too much. He has already maimed one of Chimpa's disciples and has now killed another. The conflict is gaining momentum and strength. But the man says Chimpa won't do anything. It's just not favorable to him, because the consequences will hit him himself. After all the accusations of not teaching his students properly would fall on his own head, embarrassing him in front of everyone. Aoun says his pride could be hurt, especially if the truth comes out and becomes public. But the lad replies that he has no such pride for which it would be worth risking and defying fate. He sees her anxiety and puts his hand on her shoulder, telling her that anyway, she shouldn't worry so much, it will pass. We see her clearly developing feelings for him, her gaze becoming softer and her heart becoming more vulnerable. And the man adds that the opposite is true. He even benefited by killing Yangpo because the calculation was right. He has already defeated Pianho in battle. Now Yangpo is also dead by his hand. Step by step he is advancing. Now all eyes will be on him, for his name is increasingly heard in conversations full of anxiety and admiration. If points were given for winning the air war, he would have just gotten another point, a weighty and dangerous one. Ong thanks him for what he did today, for it was an act she will remember for a long time, and smiles, admitting that she was truly happy, because the man took her side without hesitation. She says it from the bottom of her heart, and there is not a shadow of a lie or pretense in her voice, only sincerity. He smiles back and jokes that she has an obligation to be grateful because it's not every day someone saves her, and has no right to forget this day for the rest of her life because it has already become a part of her destiny and memory. He walks away with his head held proudly high, saying he wants her to keep smiling no matter what, and lived her life happily, because that's all he wishes for her, even if they never meet again. That evening, he sits on a rock, relaxedly reflecting on the previous day, trying to piece his thoughts together. He remembers the feeling of defeat that consumed him as he ran away from the demon, trembling and empty inside. The depression was so severe that if it wasn't for the goal of rebirth, he might not have gone on with his life anymore. That feeling of powerlessness when the whole world is falling apart left a deep imprint in him that does not fade with time. He wonders how his life would have turned out if he had never learned of this path full of pain and strength. At that moment, he feels a strange presence and notices his reflection on the blade glinting in the darkness. He immediately understands whose weapon it is and what it means, his heart sinking at the realization of the impending threat. Behind him stands Chinpa, holding a blade to his throat, with a face full of rage, as if madness had seized his mind. The man says he didn't expect the man to come so quickly, because it meant he had been around for a long time, and doubts whether he can dodge. Despite all the experience from his past life, his internal energy is still low. He ponders what to do, weighing his options in a matter of moments, heart pounding in his chest. But suddenly he feels the aura of the sword disappear, as if the rage has receded, giving way to cold calculation. Chinpa sits down beside him, showing no more hostility, only a silent wariness in his movements. Maguk looks at him and notices his smile, furtive and a little mocking, like a predator's before a game. Chinpa asks why he did it. His voice is calm, but there is a sense of tension in it, like before a storm. Maguk replies that because he acted like an idiot, like he asked for what happened. Chinpa demands an explanation, his gaze becoming sharper, like a blade piercing flesh. And Maguk, without hesitation, asks bluntly, has he come to fight him, or is he just scaring him? The one remains silent, his whole appearance making him wait for his cue. But then he tosses the sword up and puts it to Maguk's throat again, asking whether to cut off his head and show it to his father. Would he care? Maguk says he doubts it, because he would have to deal with his father later, and that's another story. Not a muscle on Chinpa's face changes, he is motionless like a statue. But he puts his sword away, signaling that he has decided to postpone the trial. Draws a long line on the ground with it, as if dividing something invisible. And then a small stripe on top of it, a sign that means something. Maguk asks bewilderedly what it is, not understanding exactly what the old man wants to say. The one replies that the long part is how much his father takes care of him, and the short part is how much is for Maguk. The lion's share, in his opinion, is not for the younger son. Maguk looks at him without averting his gaze, and then draws his own line on the ground, as if defending his place, saying that he is a son after all, and should mean at least this much. Let 7 be his, 3 Chinpa's, but not less. Chinpa grins, white teeth showing beneath his mustache, saying that you can only find out if you test it in reality, whether he kills him or lets him live. Maguk remarks that he underestimates a father's love, and perhaps in vain Chinpa clutches the hilt of his sword, saying that's exactly why she wants to check, and starts to release the aura again, still undecided. A chill ran down Maguk's back, like a premonition of something imminent. He turns around with a smile and says that there is no need for verification. Everything is already clear without it. After all, the father has 2 sons, but Chinpa is the only one of his kind. It is undeniable, and no one disputes it. Chinpa smiles, saying that he is not as stupid as his student who is already dead. Maguk stands up, saying that if the apprentice was anything like him, he'd still be alive. Chinpa throws in one last thing, that his whole life has been full of failures, and hopes they will meet as rarely as possible so as not to ruin each other. Maguk replies that he will certainly remember this as a warning and as a lesson left in his heart, and then realizes that Chinpa is no longer there. It disappeared with such speed that my eyes didn't have time to follow it, as if it had vanished into thin air, and is already leaping over the treetops, leaving only a light trail of aura behind him. Maguk looks at the empty stone and feels a painful prick inside, as if something has pricked him in the chest. He lifts up his shirt, and we see 2 bruises, dark and deep. They are marks from the light blow Chinpa gave him earlier, as if he left a reminder. Maguk realizes that he still needs to train hard to regain his strength and get back to his previous level. Chinpa may seem frivolous, but in reality he is cold-blooded, calculating and thinks through every move as if he were playing chess. The fact that he repeated twice about the severed head meant he'd really thought about it, and seriously. His visit here is more than a threat or a test. It's a test, maybe the last one. Perhaps it's a test to see if Mangak is worthy to become heir, to take his place in the circle of power. And perhaps Chinpa will be his first opponent from the 8 demon lords, in a true no-holds-barred battle. The scene shifts to Mangak, sitting in a meditation pose in his room, and we see his blue aura gradually shrink into a thin, almost invisible line of energy. The guy suddenly feels something extraneous preventing him from continuing the process. So he stands up abruptly and walks outside, climbing straight up to the roof of his house, as if looking for an answer. The young man looks up and notices his father standing on the other edge of the roof and tries to get his attention by shouting something. The man only casts a glimpse in his direction and calmly says what he heard. The son killed a disciple of the blood demon, Sword of Heaven. Mangak ponders how to choose his words, and then confirms that the one was a disciple who well deserved to perish. Father, on the other hand, emphasizes it's not about whether he deserved to die, but the fact that the bloodsword demon appeared to him personally because of this massacre. The boy discreetly wondered exactly what his father meant, and the man replies that Chinpa demands punishment. Mangak doesn't hide his surprise. Has this demon really gotten to him to demand retribution? The father confirms, yes, he himself is shocked, because he normally wouldn't make a scandal over one student. The guy begins to realize Chinpa probably wants to test how close his and his father's relationship is and see if he will be punished for real or go without consequences. That way he can see if the father sees his son as a possible successor. The man notices that his son is obviously thinking about something and, without hiding his intentions, says that he is going to punish him. Mangak doesn't believe what he's heard and notes with despair that there's not even the slightest reason for it. However, the father replies with icy calmness that an excuse can always be found if one is willing. The guy's trying to get the gist of what's being said. And the man recalls how the man had once asked which of the 8 demons he trusted the most. Mangak nods. This moment is well imprinted in his memory. He also recalls that his father never gave an answer at the time. Now the man confesses, it turns out he can't trust any of them. Even someone who holds the title of Supreme Demon doesn't deserve full faith. He recalls how the son then spoke of the need for order and hierarchy in the cult, and he asks not to cover himself with words about fighting corruption anymore. He is interested in the real essence. The man looks into the guy's eyes, clearly expecting him to be honest and give a frank answer. Meanwhile, Mangak is straining to think of possible words to accurately express his thought. Finally, the young man picks up the right words. He says he feels, somewhere along the way, they lost the true direction of the demon's trail. The man stares at his son in surprise, and finally wonders what exactly he means by such a cryptic expression. The guy replies that in his opinion, the way of the demon is to believe that only their cult can confront and defeat the absolute evil in this world. The father reacts with genuine interest, clarifying what evil we are talking about. Mangak adds that he doesn't consider the Orthodox faction to be the real opponents of their cult. The man asks, if not them, then who? The guy continues, this must be not just an adversary, but absolute evil, the true embodiment of destruction. The atmosphere between them thickens rapidly, as if before a storm, but the young man does not pause. He says that it is about that evil which cannot be accepted even by the common man, one that a demon would turn away from if it had a choice. The justice and chivalric ideals so extolled by Orthodox may be good for minor sins, but they won't help anything if you're facing a real, soulless and for the Orthodox faction is based on the idea of forgiveness. And if you value people, how do you fight someone who has long ago discarded humanity and only sows destruction? Only a cult can be the one to defeat evil by embracing an even darker, more violent essence. And only when a great evil, beyond the control of even the Orthodox, bows its head to the cult of, that's when it could be said that they had reached the true path of the demon. His words seem to permeate the air, leaving neither wind nor shadows indifferent. And he adds, if they can't go down that road, they will have to punish themselves, because they will have no other way. Father slowly lowered his gaze to the ground, immersed in his own musings. And the guy realizes, the man has really thought about it. Because he hadn't heard anything like this in the cult before, and would hardly have gotten to this point himself. Mangak, on the other hand, came to this on his own, wandering the central plains and observing various fates. His father asks with interest if he has any more daring ideas in store. And with that he surprises the guy a little, but he replies that he's already said everything he wants to say. The man claims, "Now I see why Chinpa is demanding punishment." He clearly sees something in this young man and wants to test him as a candidate. Guy suggests perhaps he sensed in him a potential heir. The man agrees. Maybe so, or maybe, on the contrary, he sees him as a threat that could destroy the cult. Maguk, smirking, notices that the old man has excellent instincts, able to recognize strange souls. The father makes the same facial expression he had on the hunt and briefly orders his son to follow him. The one is perplexed and asks where exactly they are going in the middle of the night. And so, they stop in front of the massive gates of the Cave of the Lesser Heavens. The guy explains that only candidates or those close in blood to the heavenly demon are allowed here. It is not difficult to enter the cave, but if you don't pass the test, you will stay inside forever, as in a living coffin. Only half of those who enter manage to survive. Even among those bound by blood to the heavenly demon, half of them die after failing to deal with what awaits within. This place is so dangerous and filled with fear that even his ambitious brother didn't dare to declare a desire to go through it. But the young man realizes that to become a heavenly demon, he must endure this test. Maguk wonders, does his father really intend to force him inside? The man confirms, he went through it himself when he was about the same age. The guy asks how long it took his father to get out. Toth replies discreetly, it took him 2 months to complete the ordeal. The young man is amazed. After all, his father is considered the most capable and gifted among all heavenly demons, and even he had to spend 2 whole months on this. The man adds, he was the only one who made it through in that time frame, while others get out after an average of 3 years. The boy asks doubtfully if he is being sent there without any training. The father replies, this is the very punishment that was in question. Maguk is starting to get visibly nervous, drops of sweat rolling down his forehead. He says he's coming out. His father's either going to kill him or he's going to kill him. Either hopes that the son survives and grows stronger after going through this. The young man's face, overwhelmed with anxiety and doubt, gradually and slowly turns into a confident grin. And he says with defiance, if it's gotten this far, he'll get out of there sooner than his father once did. The man smiles with slight pride and advises his son to focus on the most important thing for now, just surviving inside the cave. Maguk decides to call it a day after all and goes inside. Moving into a hallway with an extremely strange, even absurdly ridiculous and wildly pretentious design. The guy starts to wonder how nightmarish this place must be if so many other people have gotten in here and then gotten stuck. As far as a young fighter's eye can see, there are no enemies in sight. And he continues forward along the narrow corridor without losing his pace. He walks until his path is blocked by a stone tablet covered in some obscure instructions. It says, first, destroy all enemies without using either sword aura or its enhanced version. No tricks. Secondly, if you fail within the time limit, you will be given a second chance, but only after 10 excruciatingly long days. Third, those who are ready should stand directly in the purple circle on the floor. Maguk looks around, notices the bowls of grain, and wonders if that's what he was going to be fed all this time. But the man has no time to think, so he starts at once, without hesitating for a second. The guy walks confidently into the purple circle, full of determination. At that moment there is a sound, he turns around, and is surprised to see the entire room instantly fill with countless dolls. And it's not just a couple of mannequins, there are actually a lot of them. And each one is marked with bright scarlet-red markings. The man quickly concludes that these symbols are the ones to be struck with precision and lethal blows. He doesn't waste a second and springs into action. With one swing he chops off the head of the nearest doll, and the next one slices in two, like cloth under a blade. The guy keeps moving, scoping out the next target, and navigates the marks as if leading a battle in the rhythm of a dance, wielding his sword like a conductor wand. Once he finishes with the next wave of these creepy creatures, stops his slide just in time. Suddenly she notices another red mark shining on the nearest doll. He realizes that these dolls are much tougher than they seemed at first glance. One of them begins to slowly sink to the floor, and the man immediately realizes that there's no way you can let her do that. Without the slightest hesitation, he rushes forward and massacres the doll that first tried to recover. But immediately 3 more begin a similar movement, like a planned trap. The guy's running at top speed, slices one in half, follows up with a powerful blow to the skull of the next. Then he chops up the third and destroys the fourth in the same rhythm, simultaneously continuing a glide that was already becoming too fast to just stop. The last doll is also lowered to the floor. The guy clenched his teeth, and his jerk made the ground literally crack under his feet. The doll was almost out of sight, but what remains on the surface is her neck. That's where the barely visible line runs. He manages at the last moment. The blade cuts off her head with precision and mercilessness. The man exhales heavily, looking around, realizing that he almost got stuck here for another 10 long days through stupid carelessness, and thinks there's no way he could have passed this test before the regression. At that moment, the door opens with a muffled click and he heads towards it. Along the way, he notices another sign on the right side of the road. It shows the number of attempts it took others to pass the place. Some managed only the 9th, others the 16th, and someone all the way to the 37th attempt to get ahead. Others left complaints, assuring they would die here, trying to get back out, but the system wouldn't let them. Finally, one person proudly wrote that he passed everything on his 6th attempt and even called himself the strongest person to have been here. And then the man's eyes stumbled upon a line, the handwriting of which seemed painfully familiar. The author called everyone else idiots with contempt. These are no doubt his father's words. A man recognizes them immediately. He chuckles to himself, realizing that his father, though right, was still rather harsh on his predecessors. When Muguk enters the next room, it turns out to be completely littered with assorted weapons of all shapes and sizes. Guy takes a good look around, comes to a conclusion. Since there are so many weapons here, the trial must involve their use. A new stone plaque gives out fresh instructions. The first is to use one of the weapons hanging on the wall and chop in half the stone ball standing in the center in 2 hours. Second, the use of aura is allowed, but is not a requirement to complete the task. Third, if the test fails, it can only be repeated after 20 long days. The man does as instructed, stands on the purple circle. Immediately the floor beneath him opens up, from which rises a stone platform with a ball. The guy looks down with interest, and wonders why such a small thing as this balloon is given so much time. If he used his sword aura, he would chop up hundreds of such objects in 2 hours, and it wouldn't be difficult. He picks up one of the swords hanging on the wall and strikes the balloon from above. However, the balloon is not only unharmed, but the sword itself also breaks in half without leaving a scratch. He comes to the conclusion that a normal punch, alas, will not help the situation. Since that's the case, the man decides to use an enhanced sword aura and chop the balloon in half to get to the next stage of the challenge as quickly as possible. He's already beginning to fill the blade with a dense aura, but suddenly he stops, and after a bit of hesitation, he retracts his aura, lowering his sword. He thinks it would be too easy and boring to pass the test that way. The man begins to wonder how others have coped. One claimed to have gotten through on the first try using enhanced aura. Another took a full 89 attempts to shatter the orb without any aura. The other participants did not understand how such a thing was possible in principle. One even claimed to have no aura at all, but he was immediately accused of lying, for it seemed impossible to pass without it. The boy recalls his father's strange phrase, "got heat, lost." And for a long time he can't understand what exactly he meant. Usually my father would just scold everyone and move on, just like he did during the first trial. The exact wording on the sign comes to mind. It said, allowed to use, but not required to use at all. And at that moment, he realizes that the present condition involves passing without using sword aura at all. His father's phrase was a hint. The enhanced aura creates heat, which means it's what's preventing him from successfully passing the test. He strikes again, breaking another sword. Then tries an axe, even a heavy hammer, but all in vain. Exhausted, the guy is breathing heavily, surprised that he couldn't even leave a scratch, and begins to question whether it's even possible without an aura, especially when time is almost up. He hesitates, wondering whether to use the aura, but he holds himself back at the last moment and sighs heavily with a grim expression, assuring himself that his father had definitely gotten through this without an aura, and there must be a way. He begins to guide the aura with thin threads, letting them towards the ball, trying to feel what can't be seen with normal vision. Guy examines the orb, listens to his gut, and suddenly he notices a barely perceptible line, invisible to the eye, but caught by the aura. He raises his blade, focusing all of his attention on that fine line. and concludes, it's not a trick of the eye, but faintly visible stripes forming a perfect circle in the center of the ball. He is focused and in complete control of the situation, strikes a precise blow with his sword, and slices the orb in two, exactly along the hidden outline he was able to sense thanks to the aura. The guy can't hold back a cheer. He did it. It worked out. Inside the shattered balloon, he discovers another, smaller one, and unmistakably recognizes in it the demonic essence, so familiar and yet dangerous. Now we have learned that demonic essence is such a special pill, that if it was swallowed by someone with demonic techniques, they'd get a colossal amount of energy. It's a real power boost. If the guy had shattered the orb with his enhanced sword aura, the pill would have exploded due to the heat, and everything would have gone to ashes without leaving a trace. This reward is exclusively for whoever can chop the orb with a regular sword, without any enhancements. The boy smiles faintly and thanks his father for the timely warning not to create heat. He begins to channel his energy, carefully, taking his time to absorb the pill. It was as if the pill itself was reaching for his face, floating slowly in the air as if realizing the importance of the moment. And then a light begins to shine in his core. A sparkling stream of energy swirls around the body. When he successfully absorbs the pill, everything around him seems to freeze. The man opens his eyes filled with determination. He exhales deeply, feeling a surge of power, and gets to his feet, ready for anything, and immediately starts waving his arms in the air, as if practicing his strokes, testing his senses. A power pulsed through him that he had never felt before, new, foreign, but pleasant. And yet it was power that he loved most in his life, and now it belonged to him. In the next room, the rules are laid out. The first is to distinguish between life and death without confusing them. Second, if you fail, a retrial will not be available until 5 days later, at the earliest. Third, when you're ready, just stand in a circle without hesitation. The man is racking his brain, trying to imagine what kind of ordeal awaits him this time. But still, without a second's hesitation, becomes a purple circle, preparing for anything. The floor goes down and a massive slab of stone rises smoothly from it. But this time there's something lying on its surface, and it's immediately obvious. He looks at it more closely, then leans closer, and realizes that herbs of different colors and shapes are neatly arranged in front of him. The man concludes that apparently it is now necessary to determine which of these herbs are poisonous and which can be consumed without consequences. Guy smiles slightly, remembering how he once searched all over the world for rare ingredients. Who asked to find Rianch? Those were hard times. And now he knows how to distinguish between any herbs and poisons, and even knows their exact effects. So for him it will just be a freebie, an easy stage, not challenging. He picks one up and mentally notes, here's the one that's definitely not poisonous. Something familiar about its flavor, texture, everything fits together. The slab begins to slide downward, hiding in the floor. And he is surprised, for immediately the next one rises in its place, with a new set of herbs. The guy concludes, that's how the system keeps you from taking the test at random, eliminating randomness. And they want the applicant to pass at least the second level of the test by proving knowledge. He picks up another non-poisonous herb in his hands and looks at it. The slab goes down again, reacting to the choice of its test warrior. The guy stands there and nothing happens, the tension in the air, the silence is frightening. He begins to wonder if it's over. Maybe the ordeal is over? And then he hears the massive doors on the left side begin to open slowly. He walks there, passing by the stove without looking back. At this time, the voices of other people are heard, speculating aloud that they will become poisonous creatures if they cannot pass this stage. Someone says that you have to study, otherwise everything will be useless. Someone managed to pass on the 96th attempt, and someone went bald during the process. The man chuckles and says to himself, me too, brother, me too. The last comment on the stone slab reads, don't rely on luck, and it's true. Muguk smiles, realizing his father wrote it. The handwriting was recognizable. So the one had memorized absolutely everything he'd eaten since the first trial. It was a shame they still had hair. If only it had suffered too, it would have been ironic. The final challenge states, you must survive the illusory life and death trap. If you die there, you die for real, no chance of a second try. Those who are ready should not hesitate to stand in the purple circle to begin. He notes that for the first time the ordeal involves a real threat to life. It can end in death, and it is no longer a game or an illusion. He hears the other contestants on the slab saying with a tremor in their voices that it was a brutal tin can and that they never want to go through it again. One of them says, "If I become a heavenly demon, I'll find the one who invented this and cut him." And the father, in his usual stern style, simply wrote, "Don't rest." Muguk ponders that it might not just be about the trial, but advice in general, how to live on, without stopping, without rest, always onward. The reality surrounding Muguk begins to fade away, melting before his eyes. He looks away, and before he knows it, as he finds himself in some scorched, desolate desert world. He's amazed. The wind here, the scenery, everything feels too real, frighteningly natural. He picks up sand from the ground, and it turns out to be real, loose, warm. The guy doesn't understand how they could even create such a thing, so sure. And then he hears loud footsteps on all sides, echoing across the wasteland. He looks around and sees that he is surrounded by zombie warriors ready to attack. The kid says that even though they're illusions created by this place, but they feel like the real thing, murderous intent emanates from them. The man adds mentally that this is a great chance for him to prove himself. He draws his sword and brings it down sharply, a symbol of readiness for battle. A horde of dead men rush right at him, giving him no time to think. When they're almost there, he senses something, an inner call, and abruptly steps forward, avoiding an attack from behind, as if everything had been planned in advance. Counterattacks, striking precisely at the head of the nearest enemy, without mercy. When enemies try to use his movement, he quickly blocks it, and leaps over them in the air, spinning like a whirlwind. He ponders, since they are not alive, feel no pain. You can beat them without a shadow of a doubt, without regret. The young warrior fills the sword with aura, and the blade glows, cutting through a huge chunk of enemies with one powerful attack. Thanks to the demonic essence, he now easily controlled the internal energy. It flowed through his body like a river, unhindered. But the enemies still stand with their weapons without flinching, not going to give up, like they have no fear. He looks around carefully, tension rising, waiting to see who will move first to strike ahead. Spotting the nearest group, they don't hesitate. Those soar through the air, leaping straight at him like a pack of predators. He inhales deeply, then exhales, and begins to emit a blue aura. When enemies rush at him without sparing himself, he sprays a blue aura around him. He takes a sharp swing of his sword, warping the space, leaving blue cuts on their bodies in various places like branding marks. I can see where this is going. The next second, before I even realized what had happened, they all get blown to pieces by Muguk's attack, a straight Devil May Cry-inspired scene. Blood flies all over the arena, bodies crumbling into mincemeat, falling to the ground silently. He takes a swing of his sword, shaking off the blood that has yet to cool, and he looks around, carefully, as if he senses danger, trying to figure out if it's over or if it's just the beginning. But here he senses something new, powerful, and it surprises and alarms him. He admits it would be a shame if this was the whole fight, because right now he feels something much stronger coming. Something that could really challenge him, a real challenge. The scene jumps to late in the battle, at which point Muguk chops off one of the enemy's heads. Suddenly, he senses something strange, and at the last moment dodges a flying arrow, as if in scenes from the Matrix. The man is clearly exhausted. His body is literally on edge. He is constantly dodging attacks, and the enemies are getting stronger and more dangerous each time. Now he realizes what his father meant when he said, "Don't rest." This battle is the first to be felt by the present since its rebirth. Every moment of the fight, where lives are on the line, makes it feel like he's finally catching up to his old form. His former instincts begin to slowly fuse with his current body. Each blow, each movement, memories come flooding back. There's an army of throwing knives flying at his face, and he abruptly unsheathes his sword, reflecting them back like a whirlwind of steel. The guy doesn't stop, and a moment later he brings his knives back, launching his counterattack and cutting out some of his opponents. He realizes that his enemies must act faster, be stronger, so he can push his fighting skills to perfection, to the limit. The man easily slices another fighter in half, and blood spurts out of his body, exploding in the air in a scarlet fountain. The remnants of his aura hang in the air like an invisible veil until his enemy's body falls to its knees, shrouded in death. Muguk sticks his sword into the ground, using it as a fulcrum because his legs no longer hold him up. Suddenly, everything around him begins to change, and he feels something strange enter his mind. Sweat beads in his face and Space returns to the testing room, but he still can't tell if the test is over. The guy heads to the next sign that says he passed the tests. The tablet reports that it is hoped that his power will be used to help the heavenly demon cult prosper and grow. Muguk smiles slightly, realizing that he passed all the tests in one day, while it took his father a whole month to do so. If anyone found out about this, there would be an uproar in the cult. The man knew he would not be praised, but would begin to doubt his accomplishment. Eventually, he makes a decision. The best way out is to stay in the shadows and keep practicing, improving his skills to perfection. A time jump occurs, and we return from the mine to my father's chambers. His father looks up and informs him that it took him 100 days to pass the tests. Muguk replies that he tried his best, but could not beat his father's record. The father asks if he has chopped up the stone ball as he is supposed to, and the lad answers in the affirmative. He adds that he didn't rest for a second during the final illusory challenge. Dad clenches his jaw, but then suddenly smiles. Muguk is surprised. It's the first time he's seen his father smiling. But as he looks up, he notices that his father's face is stern again, and the boy begins to wonder if he's imagining it. His father says that at least he is not a fool. Muguk replies that of course he is, for he is the son of a great heavenly demon. Father is clearly pleased with this answer. Muguk recalls that before his rebirth, he always thought his father just enjoyed making his children fight to the death. Now the boy begins to better understand his actions. He realizes that his father is a man willing to sacrifice his own children for the good of the cult. Now he knows for sure that his father takes no pleasure in watching their deadly fights. At this point, a voice booms out, and an elderly man appears and informs him that it's incredible. Muguk has gone through everything in just 100 days. He is the second most important person in the cult, Shima Myung's chief advisor, and the one his father trusts the most. Muguk greets him, saying it's been a long time since they've seen each other. Myung, for his part, says he's glad to see him here and adds that he has an important cult-related question he'd like to discuss. Muguk is surprised that Myung wants to discuss cult affairs with him. After all, it means that his father approves of his involvement. Myung explains that last year they received an anonymous letter about corruption within the ranks of the demon army. Muguk hesitates, realizing that the demon army is one of the fighting units, and its head is Chimpa's own brother. He begins to suspect that Chimpa might be involved in the case. Myung continues, saying that they conducted their own investigation, but it failed. The officer dispatched was killed. Muguk asks if the demon army killed him, and Myung confirms the person responsible for killing the officer committed suicide. Muguk realizes the danger of what is happening. He realizes that those accused of corruption will face execution, and those involved will go to any lengths to hide the truth. Even if he becomes an investigating officer, he will not be spared. The man decides to ask Myung if he is really being sent on a mission where his life will be threatened. Myung answers in the affirmative, adding that he will have to risk his life. Muguk looks at his father, trying to understand his intentions, and suddenly realizes, this is another test. Father recalls that Muguk himself once said he would keep everyone on a leash. Guy replies that he'll do it when he becomes a celestial demon. Dad asks if he's scared. Muguk realizes that refusal is impossible and agrees to accept the mission. Father remains unruffled, but his gaze seems full of pride. Muguk isn't sure if his father is really proud of him, but vows to perform well. Muguk asks for a drink with his father, as this may be their last chance. But the father just gets up and walks away from his seat, interrupting the protagonist. Left with Myung, Muguk awkwardly jokes that although his father acts tough, he actually cares about them. Myung replies that he doesn't think so, and the guy wrinkles his nose. So Darien, a special officer from the Nirvana Pavilion, appears outside. Muguk irritably asks why Darien has come, since he asked for the prettiest girl from the pavilion to be sent. Darien jokes that he must be the beauty in the eyes of his superiors, which only irritates Muguk even more. The man waves it off and declares that it's time to get to work. Darien asks if they're leaving right now, and Muguk confirms. The guy turns around and asks what Darien knows about the demonic army commander. Darien replies that the commander is Gu Chungong, Chimpa's younger brother, who has been commanding the army for 8 years. Under his leadership, the demon army had become an elite unit recognized by all. Muguk replies that it means only one thing, they're doing a good job, and Darien agrees. Walking up the steps, Muguk stops suddenly and turns to Darien. The one asks what's wrong. Why did he stop now? Muguk wonders if Darien is going to investigate corruption in the demon army. Darien admits that he's going to, but there's not an ounce of enthusiasm in his voice. He explains that even if they do expose the corruption, nothing will change. Muguk wonders if Darien is implying that nothing will happen without a change in top leadership. He continues forward and asks if Darien is afraid. He replies that he doesn't. Muguk insists, asking how this is possible since the previous officer was killed. Darien admits that that officer was his immediate superior in Minor. Now Muguk understands why Darien is so set in his ways. It's not indifference, but real sadness. We are transported to the demonic dragon's courtyard, where two men are questioning someone about where he came from. It turns out to be none other than Darien and Muguk. Darien introduces himself, saying he is here on business with the commander. Muguk is surprised at his boldness. This guy acts defiant, like he doesn't care about anything. The guards start laughing out loud. He doesn't look special, unless he's got a problem in his head. The man is told that it is forbidden to pass without authorization, and no one has abolished the rules here. Darien takes the document out of the book and states that it is an official order from above. The guards are persistent. They can pass upstairs, but they're not going to open the gate themselves. The guy assures that there's no need to call his elders. He'll meet them in person, as the order states. However, the guards insist that they will not let him take a step without approval from above. Darien is not happy and asks the question, do they really want to stop an inspector with an order in his hand? One of the men declares that such nonsense could only be thought up by a lunatic who has lost his mind. Inspector or no inspector, if you've already come, then obey the local laws. The guy starts to get nervous. No one takes his words seriously. They think he's delusional. The security men explain, yes, he has the title of special inspector, but nothing else. No power, no influence, just an empty title that inspires no respect. Darien is clearly concerned, his eyes growing anxious. At this point, Muguk intervenes, wondering if they even know who they're talking to. The guards reply that they know, and the one approaches, clarifying, seriously, are you sure? And if so, how dare they treat him like that? At which point he kicks them sharply in the balls. Now that didn't have to be so cruel, honestly, it seemed excessive even for him. The guards squirm in pain at Darien's feet, and Muguk throws to him, don't just stand there like a pillar, lead us. The guy nods silently and moves forward, showing he's ready to continue on his way. However, around the next corner they are met by a new crowd, people clearly not happy to see their guests. The guy is worried that these guys will get in his way. He threatens to send them to jail. Some in the crowd laugh. The rest look on with suspicion without saying a word. Darien loudly announces that he is a special inspector and demands the name of the person who spoke. There's a shout from someone. Who are these bastards, and why are they making such a ruckus in the middle of the yard? The one calls himself the captain of the first squad of the demon army, Gwydan, if that's enough. Guy recognizes him, a villain whose crimes are known even among demons. Muguk remains silent for now as Dan moves closer, asking what's so quiet all of a sudden. Darien reintroduces himself and demands respect. He has come at the behest of the pavilion itself. Gwydan wondered what would happen if he refused to follow orders. The guy is threatening arrest. Obstructing an official investigation will be followed up. The captain starts laughing. Does the man really think he can pull something like that off here? The crowd laughs amicably. Only Muguk remains completely calm as he watches. Then suddenly becomes serious and throws in a sneer that even made him feel scared at such words. Darien is visibly nervous, realizing that the situation is getting out of control. Muguk steps forward and addresses the captain, as if they were old acquaintances. He holds out his hand and reminds me. The last time they crossed paths was at a banquet, if he remembers that one. Dan is perplexed, asking what he's even talking about, at which point Muguk squeezes his palm tightly. At the same time, he presses with such force that he breaks bones and calmly declares, it's time to go inside. If Dan decides to hold them off, he'll be without a hand forever, he warns without a hint of humor. The captain tries to keep a straight face. They say he's a noble blood. Swords are not scary for him. Muguk clarifies, does he really think he can hold a sword after his arm is broken? Dan snaps back, saying he wants to see him do it, but steps aside, showing fear. The man thanks him for being accommodating and promises to buy him a drink next time. The guy asks how he knows him. It's too personal. Muguk smirks. That's the thing. He doesn't know him at all. Darien is stunned. Why then did the man immediately relent? Maguk replies simply, the handshake was not friendly, the captain will now eat with one hand. The guy calls him crazy, but Maguk tells him not to talk too much and leads them on. Climbing the stairs, Darien points. The right office is on the 7th floor. However, before entering, they are again stopped by guards. You can't go in without an appointment. Maguk exhales tiredly, how much is too much? And says they're on a mission. It's an official investigation. The guards remain adamant, refusing to open the doors without confirmation. Maguk shows the document right to their faces and says, to stop the order is to stand against the will of the leader himself. He adds that if they don't care, let them try. Just don't let them regret it later. A voice comes from inside, saying, let the second young gentleman in without delay. Inside, they are greeted by an elderly man sitting quietly in his seat. He immediately apologizes for the rudeness of the guards. Say, ignorance, nothing personal. Asks to understand. It's a demonic army commander named Ginyong, outwardly calm, but the power is palpable. Maguk feels a strange tension. There is incredible power hidden in this man's body. It makes the guy anxious. He tenses up internally and can't relax. Maguk says with a smirk that the people outside clearly have a lot of free time, fighting for no reason. The commander calmly replies, there is a proverb, he who knows nothing is brave. Maguk parries that it's those who know who are brave these days. They make plans and take action. Ginyong nods with a slight smile, agreeing. Yes, perhaps he is a bit behind the times. Maguk marvels at the calmness of this man, even after a tense exchange of words. Ginyong wonders why exactly he was assigned to such an important investigation. Maguk admits it was a punishment from his father, not a personal initiative. The commander becomes curious, wondering exactly why he got such an assignment. The man explains he made a mistake while hunting that he didn't notice right away. Ginyong laughs loudly. He was clearly curious about what happened on the hunt that was so special. Maguk realizes that the commander wants to know why exactly he was chosen. He asked if it was an anonymous letter again, like the last time it all started. Darien replies sharply that it's a secret, but Maguk admits, yes, a new letter has arrived. The guy's shocked. Why would he say that? That's classified information. Ginyong only sighs heavily. He already guessed this. It's nothing new. Being the commander of a demonic army means being a constant target of rumors and hostility. Maguk says they will try to complete the investigation as soon as possible and hopes for understanding. Ginyong is surprised. What other inconvenience? He thought he and Maguk had a closer relationship. Toth remarks, everyone knows that Champa supports his brother, not himself. Ginyong replies, maybe, but a brother is a brother, and he makes his own decisions. He wants to support Maguk, not anyone else. The guy smiles and jokes. Good to hear. Now he's confident in the support. Ginyong responds by saying he'll rely on him too and provide a place to rest. Maguk calls that great news and turns to leave. However, the commander stops him, asks him to be careful. He is seriously worried. The guy asks if this is about a recently murdered investigator. Ginyong smiles. No, not at that. He's just worried about him humanly. He's sure the cult leader wouldn't have sent his son to certain death. Maguk thanks for his concern, but says he has to go and leaves the room. As soon as he leaves, the commander's face changes drastically and the protagonist feels it even with his back. It becomes creepy and cold, all contrived smiling gone. Maguk's expression turns cheerful and he mutters. His father wants him to kill Ginyong. The scene shifts. We see the father. Myung says he should have gone himself instead of his son. Father replies that Maguk has stated, they've lost the way of the demon. Now there's something to prove. Myung is shocked. Did his father really send him to his death just because of one phrase? The father raises his sword and declares, if he dares to speak loudly, let him confirm his words with actions. Myung is stunned. He feels like his father wants to get rid of his own son for talking. The scene changes abruptly again, and a dead crow, hanging lifelessly upside down, appears before our eyes. Everyone present in the demonic dragon court is surprised by her appearance and clearly perplexed as to why she is here. With irritation, Maguk and Darien are mocked for being investigators. With undisguised sarcasm, Maguk notes that the loudest outcries are those who prevented him from entering the hall. At this point, the voice of a man, clearly angry at what is happening and at the whole production, rumbles through the room. When a new person enters the room, a deep battle scar is immediately apparent on his face. The protagonist wonders about his identity, who he is, what he breathes, why he interferes. The answer doesn't take long to come. It's the commander of the Third Corps, whose name is Zhang. Darien recognizes him and remembers that the one is said to have the most powerful fighting force of all. But at the same time, the character of this commander is explosive, irascible, and rather difficult to predict. Maguk decides not to be ceremonious and directly asks if the commander has any specific grievances with what's going on. He replies sharply and indignantly, saying, "Can't you see they hung the abomination right in the passageway?" Maguk says that someone from the demon army planted a raven right on his bed. He adds that, thinking it was some kind of local tradition, you just didn't bother to look into it. Zhang remarks with a chuckle that it would be easier to find the culprit and punish him than to put on a show like this. There is a tense silence between him and Maguk for a few long seconds, gazes crossing sharply. Maguk nods without averting his gaze, agreeing to begin the investigation, and it is with Zhang. The commander doesn't immediately understand what he's getting at and clarifies what's going on and what we're talking about. The answer sounded calm. It was about an investigation that would start with himself. In a serious tone, Maguk orders his companion Darien to gather all materials concerning Zhang. He orders to get financial reports, documents, and even the smallest information about the actions of this commander. Zhang is outraged, claiming that not even Maguk himself has the authority to behave so boldly. Maguk looks coldly at the man and confidently declares that he has quite enough authority. At the same instant, there was a deafening rumble as Zhang stomped his foot on the floor with all his might, holding back his rage. Maguk says without a shred of fear that he can freak out all he wants, but he can't obstruct the investigation. He adds that hindering the investigation would already amount to treason, and let the man remember that. The commander's men immediately rush to restrain him, as if sensing that he might make a mess of things. Maguk repeats that he will start with him, so resistance is futile and will get him nowhere. Zhang, angry and irritated to the max, restrains himself, saying he will go all the way no matter how hard it is. Everything around them comes to a standstill, and the scene changes. Maguk is now sitting at a table, with the same commander across from him. The guy ponders where to start the conversation, as if searching his memory for a key moment or clue. Zhang sits opposite, his face twisted with irritation and inner tension like a hunted beast. Maguk asks a question, hinting at continued resistance, but the man doesn't see what this is all about. And then Maguk calmly says that he was the one who sent that very letter, the proof, and the key to the beginning. Darien is stunned. Such a conjecture seems insane. He has no way of understanding Maguk's motives. Zhang waves it off, pretending he has no idea what this is even about, or what he's involved in. But Maguk's gaze didn't waver in the slightest. It was full of confidence and seemed to burn through. But Zhang's face gradually changes, and looking at his own hands, he asks how he did it. He starts rubbing his fingers together, fidgeting nervously as if he's trying to gather something important in his head. Maguk explains that Zhang got into the crow story to deflect suspicion away from a commander named Chongong. Zhang bitterly confirms, that's right, that was the plan, and he couldn't have done it any other way. Maguk adds that only the Third Corps did not react to the crows in any way, and that seemed odd. Zhang is surprised at his observation and accuracy in his conclusions. It's obvious he didn't expect this from an investigator. Maguk recalls that the commander's men have tried to stop him before and expressed concern. These actions, according to the man, prove Zhang is not able to turn a blind eye to what is happening around him. He's silent. It's all coming out too fast. He obviously didn't expect to be caught by the tail so soon. But Maguk hints that this is not the only reason he came to this conclusion. Guy recalls Darien talking about Zhang's explosive nature, and it made associations. An incident from a past life in which the commander of the Third Corps had been killed surfaced in his memory. He was most likely killed precisely because of that very letter, an attempt to purge the army of the rot. Zhang admits that he didn't know if the letter would work, so he didn't go into detail and reveal everything. He didn't even think that the second heir would come himself and take the investigation into his own hands. Maguk asks what the man experienced when he found out about it. Zhang says he felt ashamed, because at that moment it seemed to him that they were all doomed to fail. Maguk sighs deeply and remarks bitterly that young people used to be much more cynical. Darien can't stand it and resents him, saying he's actually younger, to which Maguk guffaws. And yet I can't let go of the thought, what is really hiding this place? Why is it so dirty? The commander's face shows anxiety. He hesitates, but decides to speak. He explains that Chongong is using the army for his own gain, turning the fighters into assassins. Maguk is shocked. He assumed Ginyong was just taking bribes from martial artists. But if there's a murder sale behind it, it's much more serious. It's a disaster. It's bad enough in itself that the masters act without oversight, but for the sake of money, it's the end-all be-all. Darien is shocked. He doesn't understand how it's even possible that the system is so rotten. Mangak believes that the scheme works through manipulation of the first core's numbers, and it is highly likely. Zhang is dumbfounded to the core. How did this guy have such knowledge? How did he know all the details? Mangak explains that it was the first core that overreacted to the crows, which is what gave him the idea. He adds, the third core was too calm, while the first core tried to stop everyone and swore the loudest. The man then asks how Zhang himself got to the truth. The man lowers his gaze and confesses, the accused murderer of the past investigator was a close friend of his. This friend was the one who first decided to send the letter, hoping for justice. Maguch wants to know how close they were. Zhang struggles to answer that they joined the cult together, were like siblings, and shared everything. Then follows the hard question of who he believes is responsible for his death. The answer is sharp and clear. Ginyong gave the order, and it was a subordinate named Dan who killed him. Mangak notes that if all of this is true, then we are talking about massive corruption within the first core. And if an investigator was killed, it proves how far they are willing to go to keep secrets. He begins to question whether Father and Myung really know nothing about it. There's no way that could be the case. Mangak is almost certain that they are aware, albeit partially, and are now simply watching his actions. He thinks he's being tested, whether he can handle it, even if the enemy turns out to be Ginyong himself. Mangak tells the commander that he had a truly loyal and strong-spirited friend. Zhang agrees, but painfully adds, if he had been a good friend himself, that one would still be alive. Both men look at him sympathetically, recognizing the weight of guilt he carries. Mangak thanks him for his bravery, and these words truly touch the warrior's heart. The man's eyes glisten with held-back tears, and a couple of heavy drops still roll down his face. The guy he lost was a true brother, loyal, strong, and fair to the end. Darien bows his head in silence, and Mangak sinks into thought, realizing the depth of the tragedy. He says that seeing such people gives him hope of saving the lost demonic path. He is sure that if there are such people, this world can still be changed. The main thing is to support them. The place that the divine heavenly demon should revive should be the home of such heroes. Even though Zhang had fallen in his previous life, in this one his fate would change. Now he would not die. Because the purpose of Mangak's rebirth is to save those who should not have died. Darien spoke to Mangak, noticing that the latter didn't look at all like the one all the rumors were about. The man was surprised to find out what kind of rumors were being spread about him behind his back among the others. Darien admitted that they were saying as if he was unworthy of becoming a heavenly demon, and looked away apologetically. The guy looked at him calmly, saying that even such words could be considered something of a compliment. For him himself to be worthy of bearing the title of heavenly demon was something far from praise and glory. The cult as it used to be, based on fear and violence, must no longer remain the same. It is time for change, and if it is not made, everything they have been building will inevitably crumble and disappear. The young man froze, unable to believe what he was hearing, as if lightning had struck his mind. As Mangak turned and walked away, he dropped the phrase that the cult had a duty to change, or else everything would disappear. The next day, one of Nirvana Pavilion's fighters, out of breath, reported an urgent incident. They rushed inside the building in panic, as if someone's life and future fate depended on it. Mangak, not hiding his alarm, entered and froze. For he saw Darren, bloody, next to a wounded man. The guy raised his voice, ordering everyone around him to stop and let him figure it out, and asked Darren how serious his injuries were. Darien assured that he was okay, but the other casualty was in much more serious condition. The man noticed that his comrade had broken ribs and gave orders to carry him to the medical center immediately. As the wounded were carried away, Mangak stayed with Darien and turned to the other, asking if he had done it. The answer was honest. Don pleaded guilty, and then Mangak demanded an explanation of the reason for the attack on the investigator. The guy claimed that he had hit him with his shoulder in the hallway and didn't even think to apologize for his behavior. But Mangak noted that it was probably Don who had stumbled upon him, and an apology would not have saved him from his rage. The guy clenched his fists and glared with hatred, but suddenly his lips curved in a mad grin. Through his laughter, Don recognized. Yes, that was right, it was, and he was just using the excuse to fight. Mugak calmly said that Dawn and his men were poisoning everything around them with their evil essence. He exploded, demanding an explanation, and then the man explained. People like him corrupt the discipline from within. Dawn began to argue, calling his words nonsense, demanding that they explain what they were even talking about. Mugak said without emotion that Dawn killed his brothers in the cult and last year without flinching. And 2 more years ago, he killed 3 rookie low-ranking cult fighters during a bar fight. The army brass hushed things up at the time, trying to hide their warriors' brutality from the rest of us. Dawn shrugged and said that the world was full of rebels who didn't respect the demon army as an institution. Mugak looked into his eyes and questioned whether the man knew he had the right to decide who should be sentenced to execution. The man froze, dumbfounded by this statement, and a wave of anxious silence swept through the hall. In the tense silence, everyone could feel the tension building, but Dawn only grinned, not believing the threat. He believed that Mugak would not dare to take decisive action and would not have the guts to break the hierarchy. But Mugak said that's exactly what he was talking about. People like Dawn live captive to their own image. In this moment, when he should have been scared, Dawn was only posing in front of his subordinates, not realizing the risk. The guy finally lost touch with reality, forgetting who he was and what he was obliged to strive for. Mugak moved forward, and everyone around him tensed, ready to draw their weapons at any moment. Dawn roared in laughter again, saying that to attack him was to challenge the entire demon army. To this the man calmly replied that at least he wasn't hiding behind the backs of his warriors like Dawn was doing. The guy showed his wound and stated that Mugak should consider himself lucky since it all turned out okay. In response, Mugak said he would only fight with one hand, and the fight would be between the 2 of them. Dawn realized that it was serious now and started looking for excuses, saying he would complain to his father if he got hurt. Mugak promised that even if he died here, he would not be held accountable for his actions. Darien was puzzled at what was happening, and Dawn only grinned, pulling his weapon from behind his belt. The guy waved his blade and challenged him to a fight, figuring they had about an equal chance. Darien hastily cautioned Mugak. Dawn wields both hands equally, he's ambidextrous. It was all becoming clear now. This was where his self-confidence and aggression lay. Without losing his cool, Mugak drew his sword with his left hand and confidently pointed it at his opponent. The atmosphere is electrified, tension is in the air, and Dawn is the first to rush to the attack. Mugak deftly dodges a blow so powerful that the ground behind him began to crack. Cracks crawled across the floor, hitting Darien and a few fighters standing too close. Dawn throws a straight jab forward, but Mugak gracefully executed a somersault and escaped the attack with ease. Each successive strike from Dawn was met only with air or solid blocking by his opponent's blade. Upon landing, Mugak jerked forward sharply. He intercepted the sword with a reverse grip and delivered a precise strike from below. The sharp blade severed Dawn's arm, and it flew into the air with blood like a discarded doll. Dawn wailed in pain as he watched his limb fall, leaving a scarlet trail behind him. Mugak, tired of shouting, struck him in the face with the hilt of his sword, knocking out several teeth in one motion. The guy collapsed to the floor, unconscious from the pain shock. And his subordinates immediately rushed to the attack, shouting to protect the commander. Darien called out to Mugak to pay closer attention. But the man answered only with a grim look, full of rage and inner anger. In an instant, he struck 3 deadly blows, piercing the throats of the nearest warriors with his blade. Bodies fell to the floor with muffled sounds, pools of blood spreading rapidly across the smooth surface. Shock swept over everyone, both Darien and the others watching the scene in a silent daze. Mugak, without blinking, declared that these men were traitors and deserved neither mercy nor remembrance. Dawn, left alive, began to babble something, begging for mercy, unable to speak without his teeth. Mugak's gaze turned icy, looking at Dawn like he was looking at an annoying cockroach underfoot. As Dawn crawled across the floor, disfigured and humiliated, Mugak's eyes reflected only disgust. He asked if he remembered what had become of the families of the men he had killed that night in the bar. Dawn looked up, but of course he didn't know, and didn't want to know what had happened to those people. Mugak grinned bitterly. That was exactly what he thought. This guy always pretended not to care. But those murdered men were someone's fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands, and no one will ever wait for them again. He asked one last question. Did Dawn think for a moment that these people's lives could be brought back? Toth realized his end was near and began to apologize, finally admitting his own guilt. Muguk coldly told him to bite his tongue, as if passing a final judgment without any pity, and stepped on his head with force, crushing his skull like a tomato. Everyone around them froze in horror. No one dared to move. Darien could barely contain his gagging. Muguk stood like a statue of anger looking at the remains and whispered, "Who did he think he was, killing members of their cult?" Then the scene changes abruptly. Women appear before our eyes, playing melodies on instruments. And by the looks of it, there's some high-end courtesans. After all, the man standing next to them is pouring them alcohol into elegant glasses. And it's none other than Ginyong. He mentions that he heard about the difficulties the interlocutor had encountered on the surface. And Muguk, without hiding his annoyance, replies that everything happened through no fault of his own, but was the result of a sudden conflict. The man notices that the commander of the First Corps was sent there for a reason, but out of sheer necessity, and therefore his actions raise many suspicions. Muguk thinks to himself that this man is nothing more than scum, for he once served him. And now, instead of avenging him, he's making him look guilty, like he ruined everything. Ginyong takes a measured sip from his glass and notices that although he died during the investigation, he still managed to kill one of the commanders of the demon army. Which means if this gets out and there's a trial, he'll be in trouble. He slowly looks up and as if casually asks how Muguk would feel about it, suggesting that we just end this story here and now, once and for all, without further complications. In his opinion, one commander and 3 of his subordinates are enough as victims to close the case. Muguk thanks the man for such a rare understanding in these circles, and agrees that wrapping things up nicely is a worthy solution, but there is one serious problem. Ginyong shows interest and asks what the problem is, to which the man replies that he has no confirmation or evidence. He came here on official orders to investigate, but in the end he has nothing to report to his superiors, even if he wanted to. Ginyong, grinning a little, suggests just making something up. But Muguk refuses and adds with a stone face that the latest letter mentions bribes received for fulfilling external requests. This is not a situation that can be hidden or hushed up by an effort of will. It's serious. Ginyong lowers his gaze into his glass as if pondering something important. And Muguk continues that solid, hard evidence is needed to complete the investigation. He stares intently at the man, who takes another sip, and states that Ginyong will be the one who will have to get that evidence if he wants to close the case without repercussions. The scene changes abruptly and the viewer sees Darien addressing Muguk asking what he is doing here. The man responds by saying he stopped by to visit the injured man, and then inquired as to what his interlocutor was so surprised about. Darien replies that the demonic healer is already helping, and thanks the man for bringing him just in time, as if fate had guided him. Muguk nods demurely, saying, of course, even though he is the interim investigator, they are still colleagues. Darien is a little embarrassed, not knowing how to respond to such concern. At this moment, an elderly man's voice is heard, wondering if the second young gentleman is here. Muguk turns around, and the viewer's gaze rests on the demonic healer for the first time. He is a recognized master of his craft, the most skilled healer at court, who does not help just anyone. He only works with those whose worth is unquestionable. His gift is too valuable. Muguk inquires about the injured man's condition, and the healer assures him that the patient's life is not in danger, though it will take time to fully recover. The man notices that some of the wounded have been hurt doing the will of the cult, and asks that the best medicine the palace has at its disposal be used on them. The healer promises to make it right. But suddenly, Muguk feels something strange. He begins to feel as if the faces of everyone around him are glowing with joy, as if everyone is smiling just at him. Everyone starts thanking the man with sudden enthusiasm, and he feels uncomfortable. So he coughs awkwardly, as if trying to relieve the tension, and quietly leaves the room. Darien questions what the demonic army commander said, and Muguk replies that he wants to close the investigation and leave these parts. And all responsibility, in his opinion, should be assigned to the commander of the First Corps. Darien is shocked. His most trusted subordinate has just died, and he is so calm about it. Muguk parries that subordinate was not particularly valuable. Rather, he was just used more often than others, and a new performer will be found tomorrow to take his place. Darien wonders what the plan is now, and Muguk replies that he's taken the bait and is now just watching to see how Ginyong will behave. Darien asks for clarification on what he means by bait, to which the man smiles enigmatically and says he'll explain everything when Ginyong reveals himself. Darien then asks what he should do on his own, and Muguk invites him to have a drink together so as not to waste time. Darien thinks for a moment, then smiles and says that the drinks will be on him tonight. It's only fair. Muguk smiles back, too, for the first time in a long time genuinely. The next day, the scene shows a table littered with papers and books. Muguk sits in front of him, and Darien says it's all from the demon army. On the table are logs of assassination orders and money bills, thousands of bills, found in the First Corps commander's house. Muguk, looking at all of this, smiles, so his bait worked exactly as he had hoped. Now he asks to find out who in the First Corps is the most intelligent and insightful person. There must be someone who compiled all these papers, reports, and orders. He plans to meet up with Ginyong again, and at the same time buy some time so he'll have time to find that smartass. The next scene shows him standing in Ginyong's room saying that they now have proof. The man rejoices and is relieved that now all that's left to do is to sort everything out and celebrate. He's already booked the very room where they were last time. But Muguk says a problem has arisen that cannot be ignored. Ginyong is surprised and asks again if there's some new difficulty again, and what it is this time. Muguk explains that the evidence came directly from the demon army, and the rules were that they had to find it on their own. Ginyong wonders if the origin of the evidence really plays such an important role, and the man confirms that it does, and a big one at that. After all, the chief counselor is not a fool, and if he finds out where the materials were actually obtained from, he will immediately suspect falsification in the very course of the investigation. Ginyong thinks for a moment, and then agrees that Myung is indeed smart, and asks Muguk what to do now. Muguk thinks they'll have to do a show trial, have a massive interrogation, but just for one day to create visibility. He asks Ginyong to assist in this plan. Ginyong looks at him with a grim expression, as if inwardly struggling with himself. Muguk clarifies that he himself is not comfortable with this either. They just need to follow formalities. A couple of minor documents are enough. Ginyong, though reluctantly, agrees, promising to order his subordinates to cooperate. Muguk realizes that the plan might work, and with a slight smile adds, he doesn't need important papers. He is interested in the earliest documents, those used to recruit an army, as well as the wills left by those who went on deadly missions. He needs these papers to study the handwritings and figure out exactly who was behind the writing of the orders and assassination orders. The scene changes again to a man tied to a chair. It is Yong-gu, one of the members of the First Corps. He questions why he was captured and brought down to this room. And Muguk, looking at him silently, replies that he was the one who forged the kill order logs. Jin immediately declares that he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like he's hearing it all for the first time. Muguk remarks that he didn't expect a confession. The guy was probably just following orders, and now all that's required of him is the truth. Ian continues to insist that he didn't forge anything and didn't receive any orders at all. The man replies that he understands why he's acting this way. He's probably scared to death that Ginyong will kill him. Ian freezes for a second, as if hearing something frightening, and Muguk suddenly says calmly that he can go. If he doesn't want to talk, there's no point in keeping him. He won't torture him, especially if he was just doing someone else's will. Yang looks at the man in disbelief, and Muguk adds that even if the investigators do leave this place alive, Ginyong will still kill him. The prisoner interjects what the man is saying, as if he doesn't believe what he's hearing. Muguk explains, the commander of the demonic army probably already knows he's been captured. And if he suddenly gets out without a scratch, everyone will immediately decide that he gave away everything he knew and gave up his own. And Yang knows better than anyone exactly how Ginyong reacts to this sort of thing. The man doesn't forgive. A little later, we see Darien having a serious conversation with Muguk, revealing that Zhang's speculation is that it was the commander of the demonic army who gave the monstrous order to kill the investigators of the Nirvana Pavilion, as well as Zhang's own partner. The executor of the horrible order turned out to be none other than Dang, a notorious man who has unfortunately already left this world. In addition, this man has managed to leave a long, bloody trail behind him, having committed many horrifying atrocities. Muguk sinks into thought, comprehending what he's heard. While Darien is blunt, they slaughtered a lot of people without making any distinction in terms of status or age. But someone as powerful as the commander of the demonic army would definitely not voluntarily go into chains. Muguk falls into silence for a moment, and then suddenly declares that he wasn't even going to arrest anyone. The man informs them in complete cold blood that his plan is to kill the commander without hiding his intention. Darien can't contain his surprise. He clearly didn't expect his ally to take such a drastic step. Mangak calmly explains that if Chanyang is arrested, Chanpo will immediately intervene in the situation because he won't let his brother be executed. If that happens, chaos will erupt that will be completely impossible to stop, even with maximum effort. In addition, there will be fake evidence that no one gave Dan any indication of the murders. All the blame will be dumped on the next scapegoat, and a mad bacchanalia of lies and deceit will break out. But the main thing is that if this commander stays alive, he will definitely start destroying everyone who knows the truth, just to keep silent. Even Zhang himself, who wrote the letter, ends up dead, as well as everyone who tried to protect him. This would include the deaths of all Third Corps soldiers. And, of course, Darien himself would be among the dead. But if the commander of the demonic army is killed during the arrest, things will go in a completely different scenario. The only thing left to do is to present evidence of his guilt and close this dark chapter for good. Darien, worried for his comrade, wonders if Mangak will be the next target for Chanpo. Mangak nonchalantly replies that not everyone in this world seeks revenge for loved ones who have died. This is especially true of the Blood Sky Sword, a man who doesn't waste his life for revenge, but acts reasonably. Darien asks where his interlocutor is going, for he is obviously up to something. Mangak reminds us that he's already shared his plans. He's going to go kill Chanyang, and he doesn't hide a satisfied smile while doing so. Darien wants to know if he's really going to do this right now, without putting it off for a moment. Mangak appears in front of us, already seated at the table. He announces that the investigation is complete, all thanks to Chanyang. Chanyang is relieved that he's glad he heard, as if a heavy weight of guilt and tension has been lifted from his shoulders. With a slight sadness, the man adds that he will be sorry to part with Mangak as if he were a long-time friend. Mangak says that if fate elevates him to the position of successor, he will surely repay the kindness he has received. Chanyang smiles as he memorizes those words and says he'll never forget Mangak's honest behavior. Mangak lowered his gaze, recognizing that his greed had gone so far that it would be impossible to forget what had happened. He suggests celebrating the completion of the deed, as is appropriate in such situations, albeit in the shadow of grief. Chanyang nods in agreement, supporting the idea, no doubt worth a drink to the end of the investigation. Mangak begins to leisurely pour the drink into a bowl for his interlocutor, as if preparing for a ritual. But suddenly Mangak asks an unexpected question. Why did the man choose to do this particular thing? Chanyang chuckles slightly, as if he doesn't understand what his interlocutor is getting at or why this is all happening. Mangak reminds him that he already had enough wealth to live to an old age without trouble. So why drag a demonic army into this sordid endeavor? Just for profit and new privileges? Chanyang looks at him again with the same penetrating gaze that doesn't change under any circumstances. Then he slowly places the glass on the table and says that such questions should be addressed to the dead commander of the First Corps. Mangak wonders, can a doll know anything, since it has no will or consciousness? Chanyang asks what the man is really trying to say with that, penetrating his gaze deep into his soul. Mangak admits that he's just curious to know what lies behind the cold face of his interlocutor. Chanyang doesn't take his eyes off, watching him intently, but Mangak continues without hesitation. He suggests that all that is left inside the man is the darkness of greed with not a shred of compassion. Chanyang loses his temper. In a rage, he breaks the glass in his hands, shards flying in all directions. He screams in rage, accusing Mangak of insanity, as if he has completely lost touch with reality. But Mangak replies that it is the man in front of him who has gone mad, taking such lowly orders for profit. Chanyang lets out a furious aura into the air, knocking over the table and shouting that he's sick of all this chatter. And Mangak remains seated, calmly drinking from the cup, not showing even a hint of fear or excitement. He looks up, and there is not a single spark of fear trembling in his eyes, only calm. Chanyang suddenly feels a sharp pain in his chest, and his gaze drops. He's confused. There is a blade sticking out of his body, the same sword that just pierced through him like a punishing judge. Mangak raises the cup, leisurely finishing the rest of the drink as if seeing his enemy off for the last time. He uses the Heaven Strike technique, the fifth technique of the greatest art of the soaring sword. The cup falls from his hand and shatters with a loud clang, as if putting a final stop to the matter. He stands up, addressing the dying man, the one arrested for using a demonic army and for committing murders. Ginyong's body breaks out in a cold sweat, and he begins to go into shock. His heart beats ever slower. He struggles to say that this is nothing like an arrest, for the blood is dripping from the sword, not the shackles. Manga says with a slight smile that the execution would have been inevitable anyway. Let death come sooner. He grips the hilt tighter, yanking the sword from his enemy's body, releasing a new wave of blood from the wound. He doesn't say a word, just silently looks at the man, saying goodbye without regret. Ginyong chokes on his own blood, his chest and mouth flooding with a scarlet stream, and he falls, dying on the spot. At that moment, the people from the Nirvana Pavilion run into the room, shock red on their faces. Manga glares at them, and when they see Ginyong's body, stupor grips them all without exception. He loudly announces that it was the commander of the demonic army who died resisting arrest. The assembled look tense, confused, as if not knowing what to do next. Manga orders Darien to immediately arrest all members of the First Corps and take them into custody. The case will be officially investigated, and the guilty will be punished according to the laws. Darien confirms the order confidently and firmly, pronouncing that it will be carried out. Manga then turns to Zhang, ordering all but members of the First Corps to assist in the investigation. He reports that Pavilion investigators now have the authority to fully control this investigation. Any order from Manga is now tantamount to a decree from the cult leader himself, and must be obeyed immediately. Zhang folds his arms and confirms the command. With the same determination as Darien, he replies, "Aye, sir." When he looks up, it is clear that both he and Darien have genuine respect on their faces. In their looks is the recognition that there is finally someone you can trust. Manga smiles as he looks at them, feeling that he himself has found true companions in this world. Manga returns to his father's pavilion, his steps full of determination and firm confidence. Father sits in the chair, with Champo and Myung nearby, each tense, waiting for the denouement. They simultaneously turn toward the entrant. Determination sparkles in his eyes. He doesn't falter in his stride. Kyampa looks at him, and it's clear that the man is angry, because he's just lost his brother. But Manga did not waver. There was no fear or doubt in him, only unwavering willpower. Manga greets his father and everyone else, and raises his eyes respectfully to Myung, then shifts his gaze to Chinpa and remarks that he's glad to see the man alive and unharmed, which is a lot. Chinpa wonders if everything was all right with the young man, if anything terrible had happened during this time. The man says he'd like to hear in person how it all happened, not just read the dry lines of a report. The guy replies that all the events have already been detailed in the documents, so you don't have to waste your time. The older man insists that he prefers live storytelling, because he doesn't trust paper completely. Manga pauses in thought for a moment, averting his eyes as if remembering hard moments. He notices that since these two are only watching, it means they're wondering how he'll react to the questions. The guy reports that the investigation revealed his brother was guilty of serious crimes. And at the time of his arrest, the latter tried to kill him, for which he apologizes to all for the death of a blood relative. Chinpa assures that everything is fine, and he holds no grudge as the culprit deserved to be punished justly. Although he admits that some things in the story are questionable and don't quite make sense to him. He says the brother may have been a lowlife, but hardly stupid enough to attack after being exposed. Manga suggests that when the mess started, the latter probably turned to him for help, and in return he was stabbed in the back, as his brother decided to get rid of the witness and cover his tracks for the sake of salvation. The guy admits that he doesn't understand his brother's true motives and can't give a definite answer. Perhaps he just couldn't bear the embarrassment of being grabbed by someone younger and lost his temper. Chinpa says he saw his body before coming and noticed that his chest had been punctured with one precise blow. This suggests that Muga's fighting skills are far greater than he realized if he was able to do such a thing. The young man averts his gaze, not wishing to boast, and says it is solely due to his father and his instruction. He says that Chonglong was at a loss, which made him unable to use full force against him. Chinpa smiles slightly and thanks the man for his honesty, for his words have soothed his soul. The guy regretfully says there's no need for thanks. He only feels guilty about what happened. He has killed not just a student, but also his own brother, and yet he sees no anger or reproach in Chinpa's eyes. The man observes that even rage must have limits, otherwise it turns into complete insanity. Chinpa bows low to Muga's father in respect and gratitude for all he has done. His father looks at him with sadness in his eyes, but Chimpa makes it clear he doesn't need pity at all. The gray-haired man says it's time to get ready for the funeral, and so he advises Chimpa to get some rest. He bows his head in acknowledgement and heads for the exit without another word. As he passes by Muguk, he notices that perhaps the bloody sword of heaven would like to say something to his father. Perhaps he thinks it was done too harshly and wonders if there was no other way out. When the door closes with a slight click, Myung notices that the job is beautifully done. The evidence is impeccably gathered, everything is completed without a hitch, and wonders if the guy is injured. The guy replies that he is perfectly fine and sincerely thanks them for their concern. It looks like Myung is going to praise him. But Muguk precedes him, asking what the man wanted to say. Myung only waves it off, not wanting to pursue the topic, when an unknown man enters the room. He relays that the cult leader has sent a reward for his efforts and loyalty. The guy opens the box, inside of which is a gorgeous, eye-popping sword. And Muguk can't hide his surprise. He has never held such a magnificent weapon in his hands before. Myung reports that the cult leader gives him the Black Demon Sword, a token of the highest recognition. The guy says he knows this sword is just as valuable as the White Demonic Sword, and not inferior to it. Muguk smiles and jokingly tells his father that he would be more suited to the White Sword, in spirit and in nature. Father only sighs deeply, noticing that the Black Sword fits him much better and more accurately. The young man slowly pulls out his sword, saying that perhaps his father doesn't understand him well enough. Guy exposes his blade and notices that even without internal energy, it radiates icy coldness. He doesn't hide his admiration, smiling at the sight of the weapon he holds in his hands. The father watches his son with pride, and even Myung can't help but notice that look. He realizes that his father is really proud of his younger son and admires his strength. Muguk stashes his sword in its scabbard and says that such a reward is too generous, even frighteningly excessive. Myung calmly replies that no, he has earned it all with his deeds and bravery. He says the problem with the demonic army commander was one of the hardest in the cult, and admits that he himself did not expect such a clean, quick, and decisive denouement from Muguk. He asks his father if he thought his son could handle such an ordeal. His father admits he didn't. He thought he would at least come back alive, and that would be a miracle. The boy says he knows his father wasn't so pessimistic if he sent him after all. After all, he believed in his strength, knew that he had mastered the ascending sword art, and had acquired demonic essence. Though perhaps his father didn't think that Chongung would die right there at the scene of the fight without mercy. Guy looks at the sword again and says he realizes the gift is a hidden message for Chimpa. Mole, though Muguk deserved much, he would not allow his son's name to be tarnished even by a hint. Muguk immediately bows, folding his arms and expressing his gratitude for such a valuable gift. He smiles, realizing that he understood the true meaning of the gift and acknowledged it fully. The father's eyes still burned with pride, reflecting respect for his son's courage. But, maintaining his dignity, he says his path is now free, he can go. Muguk smiles slightly and walks outside the heavenly demon pavilion, feeling the gaze on him. Chimpa's voice is heard, noting that it is a particularly sunny day and suggesting that we talk. He looks away and Muguk says in his mind that he expected this. The man couldn't leave without saying the last word. Muguk takes a step forward, and Chimpa glances at the sword and expresses obvious annoyance with his gaze. Muguk deliberately turns the blade so that the opponent can get a better look at it, and notices that this summer feels especially stifling and merciless, as if the sky itself has decided to add oil to the fire. Chimpa explodes with a scream in the next second, releasing a terrifying murderous aura. And with a furious rage, almost tearing his voice off, he calls his opponent a freak and a lowlife, claiming that he dared to sneakily attack his own brother and take his life, and now will be torn to pieces, which he will personally carry to his mass grave as a sign of blood feud and respect. The heat coming from Chimpa is so intense that Muguk has to close his eyes to avoid burning his face with his gaze, as if an open flame is raging in front of him. But the man is still full of rage, his gaze blazing like a red-hot blade, piercing the air and stabbing into his opponent. His teeth clenched to a crunch make a deafening grinding sound, as if the beast were preparing for a final rush. However, after a moment, this beast takes on the appearance of a man. A wry grin appears on his face, and the murderous aura disappears, dissolving into thin air. And with a cold sneer, Muguk admits to himself that this is what he expected. This is what the answer should have sounded like. The man raises his sword, intending, as he did last time, to touch his opponent lightly with the hilt as if in mockery. But now Muguk intercepts the blow with ease and scornfully calls him a useless old man, noting that the years have brought him neither wisdom nor dignity. He accuses his opponent of destroying the internal order of the cult because of selfish motives driven by personal anger. And if he dares to interfere again for his rotten brother, his body will be chopped to pieces and hidden in such darkness that no one will ever escape. It becomes noticeable that even Chimpa's pupils flickered for a moment. Fear, though subtle, flashed in his gaze. And Muguk, as if reflecting his actions, smiles again, lets out a fleeting wave of deadly intent, then momentarily extinguishes it. As if insinuating that if he had heard such words from Chimpa, he would have responded in exactly the same way, with the same heat and steel in his voice. Chimpa, shocked by what has just happened before his eyes, cannot believe the reality of the moment. And suddenly he breaks into a loud, frenzied laughter that splits the silence, rattling over our heads and literally piercing Muguk's ears. The rest of the soldiers around them are starting to get visibly nervous, looking tensely amongst themselves. But then, abruptly and as if on cue, the mad laughter breaks off, leaving behind a ringing silence. Chimpa, breathing heavily, remarks regretfully that perhaps the opponent could show leniency for the sake of their shared past. But Muguk replies that he tried his best to end things in a dignified, respectful manner, allowing Chimpa to step aside on his own. This man didn't just cross the line. For him it was as if it never existed. He lived beyond any rules and boundaries. Chimpa lifts his gaze to the clouds, as if realizing for the first time the weight of the words spoken, and nods silently, accepting the truth. Muguk, looking at him with cold calm, says he has no doubt the man knew of the rot that had struck the demon army and wants to understand why he kept silent for so long. Chimpa lowers his head, and there is bitterness in his voice. His brother has never listened to him, and it seems that he himself is far from blameless in his actions and decisions. When this man learned that his brother had died, he experienced a sudden and almost frightening relief, though his longing for him remained. He thought that now, finally, there would be no one in front of him who always got in the way and prevented him from breathing freely. Muguk is amazed at how candid Chimpa is about the difficult and painful family ties. They fall into silence for a while, and while Chimpa still doesn't take his eyes off the sky, Muguk suddenly breaks the silence, saying that he understands this pain and the internal struggle that the man went through. Chimpa is surprised at such words, and Muguk adds that perhaps if he had heard something like this, he himself would have experienced similar feelings. If Muguk's older brother had also died, perhaps he too would have felt relief rather than grief. For then he would not have to fulfill with his own hands the terrible fate that had long hovered over them. And for Chimpa, this realization came as a real shock, overturning all internal reference points. They continue to stare at each other, keeping their gaze fixed on each other as if trying to read the thoughts on their opponent's face. Muguk ponders exactly what image this man sees in him as he stares directly into his eyes. It was obvious that the opponent was genuinely impressed, but every word hurt too close to the heart. Even a superficial glance made it clear that Muguk spoke every word sincerely, without hiding his feelings. The man looks up and notices that this summer promises to be particularly unbearable, even for him. He turns around and begins to walk away leisurely, as if drawing a line under this conversation. And with a slight chuckle he adds that heat is not the sort of affliction that can derail him or weaken his will. Muguk admits to himself that he has never been able to figure out what thoughts were tormenting Chimpa at that moment, and admits that the confession of relief may have been masked by an attempt to destroy him. Although it is possible that the man simply decided to let the situation go, like a cloud floating in the sky. And Muguk feels he does not regret his words, his actions, or his own choices. Standing on the training ground, the warrior picks up his sword and slowly begins to draw the blade from its sheath. He has a thought in his mind. The first moments after receiving a new weapon are especially important. The sword has a duty to merge with the warrior into something unified, and this is especially true of the demonic black blade. While the weapon has not rejected its new master, without a strong bond it will never unleash its full power. Muguk grins as he looks at the weapon. He is the one who will lead this blade into battle from now on. In the same instant, the black blade let out an icy aura, enveloping the air around it with cold and gloom. The warrior makes a decision. He will put his power into this weapon to make contact between them. He inhales deeply and begins to infuse the aura into the sword, fully focused on the bonding process. You can see that the blade accepts the energy with gusto, almost like a living thing. Manga barely holds back a smile as he realizes how unique the new weapon feels. The guy wants to try out a couple techniques, test them out, get a feel for the weight and balance of the sword. He lowers his weapon, adopts a fighter's stance, and rushes forward, letting out a jab. Raising his blade for the next strike, he decides he will survive based on this new style. The man promises weapons to show far more sophisticated techniques in the future. You just have to wait. Manga meditates, day turns to night, but he still hasn't stopped his grueling training. Leon brings him food but doesn't dare to distract him, just turns around and quietly walks away. Manga trains day in and day out, losing track of time as the days pass, one by one, without a trace. Finally, he leaves the set, his body exhausted, and immediately notices the dense crowd in front of him. On everyone present is an element of red, something sinister uniting them. At first, it's hard to tell what's going on in their minds, whether they're angry or welcoming. The man muses aloud that he doesn't know if Chimpa sent these men or if they came of their own free will. However, one thing is becoming abundantly clear. Many of them are literally seething with hatred for him. Whereas previously it might not have been noticeable from the photo, the murderous aura is felt all too clearly. They concentrate the demonic energy and direct it at him, creating a deadly pressure. The pressure only increases, growing stronger by the second, and even for Manga it becomes a challenge. The man realizes their goal is not to kill, but to intimidate, to make him hide, to turn him into a prisoner of fear. But he remembers, if you learn to absorb demonic energy, it can be turned to your benefit. The core within him begins to glow, and he applies the technique to strengthen his inner meridians. The idea is simple. The energy of multiple fighters is channeled into a target, amplifying every cell in the body. The bigger the source of pressure, the stronger it becomes. This logic is at the heart of the technique. And Manga decides he'll take the chance to forge even greater power within himself. He continues to absorb streams of energy despite the pain and tension in his body. Even the enemies are having a hard time, sweat streaming down their faces, their bodies trembling with fatigue. Manga takes a step forward, piercing through the ranks, and the men recoil, looking at him with growing fear. The energy still poured inward, penetrating deep, filling the meridians in the warrior's entire body. He has already passed the second stage and feels himself approaching the third. Progress is rapid. His face contorts from the strain, his muscles cramp, but the man knows the limit has not yet been reached. Despite their efforts to break him, he only grows brighter, like a flaming torch in the dark. He passes the fourth stage and approaches the fifth and final stage, and a bright light flashes around him. The guy opens his eyes, noticing in utter amazement that the murderous energy around him has disappeared without a trace. As he looks around, he notices the look of fear on the faces. No one expected him to just swallow everything. He stops in front of one of the men and stares intently into the man's eyes without averting his gaze. The one recoils in horror and literally loses control of himself, stumbling backwards, clearing the passage. And behind him the others begin to part behind him, recognizing his superiority. There is no other way. Now he understands. These people have finally realized he can't just be broken or intimidated. Walking through the crowd, Manga feels confident. Each step he takes seems to confirm his status. He smiles as if speaking without words. The swordsmen have finally recognized his strength and power. As he approaches the heavenly demon pavilion, he stops at the throne, feeling mixed emotions. And it's not clear what prevails, pride, doubt, calmness, or the strange emptiness inside. His father asks if he wishes to take the throne, and Manga confesses he doesn't want to be his prisoner. The father sighs, noticing that his son is being stubborn again, and suggests that he just sit down without wisecracking. Manga climbs up the ladder to the top, and really sinks into the throne, listening to the sensations. Father asks what it's like to sit where the greatest rulers have previously sat. Manga looks around the room from his future seat, throws a sideways glance at the statue and nods, acknowledging, "That's cool." Inside, however, there is no excitement or triumph, only a cold calm, almost indifference. His father, looking at him, admits that he himself felt the same way when he was first on the throne. Manga recalls his father killed many people, including his own brother, to sit on that throne. Now he wants to know, what did the man feel, if neither rapture nor satisfaction? But before he can ask a question, his father utters, the swordsmen came of their own free will. Chimpa didn't send them. Everyone made their own choices, which surprises Muguk a little. A slight look of annoyance slides across his father's face, and Muguk explains he was trying to stay calm. But it was worth leaving the hall. His body betrayed him, beginning to shake as after a violent storm. The father asks with interest if they were so frightening that they caused shivers. Muguk replies that he was not afraid of the fighters themselves, but of his mistake, his wrong decision. If even one of them did not hold back and attacked, his end would have been almost guaranteed. Even if he survived, the consequence, killing the swordsman, would make him an unacceptable leader. That's what was most frightening, the chance to be in a moment again where every word would decide fate. In that strange moment he thought of his father, and could not understand where the longing came from. Father, with his usual sternness, says, the demonic man doesn't look back. He goes forward. Muguk is surprised. The phrase sounds harsh, almost callous, but he senses an attempt at comfort in it. Dad maintains his seriousness without betraying emotion. And Muguk allows himself a slight genuine smile. Muguk confesses he has long wanted to suggest replacing the demon statue with a woman, a beautiful, living woman. He jokes, maybe one of the 4 colors of the Central Plains to liven up the atmosphere. His father barely restrains a grimace, a look of disgust on his face, and Muguk realizes he's being silly. He laughs, admits he started talking nonsense barely out of the hall, and offers his father a seat. The warrior rises, turns around, and walks away, treading down the stone steps, away from the throne. But he suddenly freezes, turns around, and asks if he can kill Chinpa, briefly, without emotion. My father is silent, but you can tell by the look on his face, there is an unexpected amusement lurking in that silence. Muguk's father immediately burst into loud laughter, as if he had heard the most ridiculous joke of his life, stating with certainty that even if his son was capable of finishing off the demonic commander in a battle against Chinpa, this guy wouldn't have the slightest chance of even surviving, let alone winning. Muguk is in a daze trying to figure out if his father has set up some kind of test, and why then he has ignited the conflict. If in the end he's not going to take any responsibility for the consequences which he caused himself. The man with gray hair, smiling, says he'll take responsibility eventually after all, and even allows Magoku to take over as head of the Nirvana Pavilion as if it were a reward for loyalty. The boy hesitantly remarks that it's still the Inspection Bureau after all, not just a power decoration. Yet for some reason, they still want to make him the manager despite the obvious inconsistencies. The older man clarifies if it was not his son himself who once dreamed of overseeing order and discipline in the clan. After all, that is exactly what the words of a young fighter who aspired to become a pillar for an entire cult once sounded like. Maguk is lost in speculation again, trying to figure out if he's being used as a pawn in someone else's game, and whether this father is indifferent to whether his son survives this deadly journey or simply perishes. While their gazes are locked together as if in a ring between 2 MMA fighters, the silence is taut as a string. The guy finally realizes that there's no point in guessing what's in his father's head, it's a waste of time. So he decides to act, relying only on his own conclusions and the words he hears directly. He recalls this man being able to leave a coded message to children on a rock. Could just as easily have drawn them into a deadly game if it would have benefited him. Clenching his fist with determination, the guy decides that if he is indeed sent to kill a bull in a fight, at least let them put a sword in his hands. Otherwise, it will not be a fight, but a one-sided slaughter of a victim. The gray-haired father wonders if his son has any desires in light of recent events. And Maguk, after holding his breath for a couple seconds, says he'd like access to the demon archives. The older man reacts with genuine surprise, not expecting such an unexpected request. After all, these archives are where the rarest martial arts manuals of the Murim schools are kept. Only a select few, such as the heavenly demon himself or someone from his circle, can get in. Squinting, the father declares that if his son thinks he's going to find the ultimate martial art there, he's mistaken. Even the names of the techniques in these manuals will seem overly fancy, let alone the actual content. And to understand even half of them, you have to be not just a master, but a true madman of the martial path. The man agrees, there really are too many manuscripts in these archival walls, and too complicated. With a sly smile on his face, he admits that he still wishes to test his fate as a gambler. The father looks at the boy carefully, not realizing what hidden intentions may lurk behind this request. Maguk feels a hot tension run through his body at his father's reaction, like a current in a closed circuit. But eventually the man agrees and gives his son access to the archives, but only for 7 days. The guy thanks him respectfully without losing his dignity, realizing that there may not be a second chance. The scene shifts inside the archives, a view of a giant library, quiet and majestic. Guy recalls how he once returned to the heavenly demon cult, which was already closed at that time, hoping to get his hands on a secret demonic soul, despite being considered long dead officially. He had left the cult years ago, and his face had changed so much over the years that he had become invisible. The path from an ordinary warrior to the rank that would allow one to meet the new head of the cult was extremely thorny. And it was from this leader that he first heard of the ancient technique, whose name was the 4 steps of the wind god. It wasn't just a technique, it was the great art of movement, condensed to 4 movements. It was once just a supporting element in the heavenly demon's fighting style, but then it was forgotten. The technique disappeared from textbooks and the memory of masters, becoming a myth lost in the cycle of years. However, it was said that the last person to master this technique was Yeo Baekdo, the leader of that very cult. The screen shows Baekdo himself telling how he became a leader by finding the manual in the cult's archives. Maguk wonders, if the manual really was in the archive, why did everyone think it was irretrievably lost? The answer was frustratingly simple. It really wasn't on the shelves, and no one was looking elsewhere. The guy looks down and slightly to the right, his eyes lingering on the floor by the far bookshelf. Suddenly, he notices that hidden under one of them is a dusty volume that wasn't in the catalog. With one hand, he lifts it up, showing strength. The guy is clearly not one to be easily labeled a weakling. Then a memory pops up where he asked Baekdo about the location where this knowledge artifact was hidden. And the leader, taking a deep sip of alcohol, replied that the manual served as a prop under the 19th shelf. The man pulls out a book covered in a dense layer of dust that she has collected for decades without witnesses. He looks satisfied, realizing that the manual has actually been lying right there all this time. He opens an ancient volume and begins to read. The pages whisper secrets forgotten by hundreds of generations. It says that 4 steps are enough to go around the world without leaving a footprint behind. The man smiles demurely and says to himself, the technique consists of 4 main movements: the shadow step, the shimmering step, the path of exile, and finally the death step that crowns the path. The first of these moves, the shadow step, was created to stealthily penetrate the heart of enemy ranks. It originally allowed one person to disappear from view, as if dissolving into the surrounding shadows. But as the technique was mastered, the number of those unable to see the fighter steadily increased. Eventually, one could disappear even in the crosshairs of dozens of eyes, as if one had become invisible. The second step, shimmering, is for defense. It helps you find a retreat path when threatened. Even if the enemy is already striking, the technique can pull you out of a hopeless situation as if by magic. The third, death step, shatters enemy defenses, rushing into their ranks like a storm without warning. The fourth and final step is the rapid, a movement so fast that even the very concept of speed seems irrelevant, because the fighter is literally erased from the horizon. It's already something out of the category of legend, flash level, only embodied in the reality of Murima. We see Maguk sitting in deep meditation, immersed in the study of ancient knowledge. Then there is a time jump. Exactly 7 days pass outside the pavilion. The next shot is of his father's pavilion. Maguk's confident voice is heard, speaking of returning with a bow. The father looks at the boy, interest in his eyes, as if he's seeing him for the first time. He wonders what his son has learned while staying within the walls of the mysterious archive. Maguk chuckles slightly and says discreetly that he has studied the art of martial displacement. The older man clarifies which technique he has comprehended, and the man utters, "For steps of the wind god." Upon hearing this, the father is shocked, as if he has heard heresy, and refuses to believe what he has heard. He immediately demands an explanation, finding it impossible that his son has mastered the lost shadow step. Maguk replies with seriousness that he would not lie about things so serious and dangerous. The man continues to stare at his son, with slight disbelief, still doubting. It requires a demonstration of skills learned to dispel doubts or confirm them. The guy calmly asks what he'll get in exchange, and the older man takes a deep breath. Says she will spare his life, a sentence that sounds like a challenge and a promise at the same time. Maguk grinned, for that was the answer he had expected, anticipated with exact intonation. He begins to release his aura, concentrating as he prepares to apply the first of the steps of the ancient technique. Father feels a powerful vibration beneath his feet, as if the ground is responding to the energy vibrations. Muguk soars into the air from the energy overflowing from him. The guy opens his eyes abruptly, and at that moment activates the shadow step. It all begins. The sight is stunning. Muguk's legs begin to disappear from view, as if dissolving into thin air. For the first time ever, the real, genuine emotion on my father's face is surprise. He is unable to hold back a sigh of admiration, because right in front of him his son begins to dance in battle. Using shadow step, the guy moves with grace, as if a shadow merging with space. The lower part of his body becomes almost transparent, as if he is turning into something unreal. And in some moments it seems that he disappears altogether, as if he had been erased from reality forever. His father questioned the origin of the wind god's four-step technique. And the guy looked up and calmly stated that he had learned it while studying the texts in the heavenly demon archives. The man looked at him in disbelief and questioned whether his son really dared to lie to his face. And the young man replied in surprise that he did not understand why his father could not believe that this was the pure truth. Father confidently asserted that such a technique did not exist in the heavenly demon archives at all. Guy, however, insists that it was in these scrolls and books that he first encountered this unique technique. And then the father begins to suspect that his son is playing a devious game and is desperately trying to trick him. The guy cautiously suggested thinking about it. Maybe the technique was just in the wrong section and forgotten elsewhere. Father froze with a cold stare, then admitted that he knew the manual was indeed inside the vault. The man explained that he stumbled upon the equipment by accident when he wasn't looking for it at all, but was doing other searches. His father's gaze became suspicious and heavy, as if he couldn't shake off his doubts and worries. Yet there was not even a shadow of doubt or a sign of an attempt to lie in the confident young man's eyes. The father asked in what exact place the book was hidden, and the man honestly answered, under the shelf. That bookshelf was warped, and he discovered the manual when he tried to put it back in order. My father exhaled heavily and said he knew perfectly well an important part of the book had been deliberately removed. The man raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked how he could be so sure, how his father had such information. His father replied with a sneer that this was exactly what he himself would do if he had a need to hide something. He moved toward the throne, stopped halfway, and expressed his desire to hear the technique in its entirety. The boy only grinned slightly. He had long expected things to lead to this turn of events. His real goal is not to take the throne, nor to defeat his father, but to end Morphin and save him. More than anything, he wished his father would give up the throne and become a wanderer, seeing the world with his own eyes. So teaching him the wind god's four-step technique wasn't a pity to him, but he didn't want to do it for nothing. My father turned around abruptly, a fire flaring in his eyes that foreshadowed the argument. And the young man added with a smirk that in this world, no treasure comes just like that, without an exchange. The father grudgingly admitted that in some ways the son was right, but reminded him that he had once taught him the technique himself during one of his hunting trips. The guy immediately recalled that it was payback for the booze his father was actively drinking at the time. The father can't believe how cunning his son is, and is amazed at how long he has hidden it. He calls him defiant, as if he can no longer contain his accumulated surprise. The young man replies with a chuckle that he was just waiting for his power to reach its current level. The father asks the key question: what does the guy want in return? At what cost is he willing to share knowledge? A man with a firm voice says, he needs the heavenly demon defense technique, and not something else. This legendary technique protects the wearer's body. It is only allowed to be learned by a heavenly demon. Once you master it, you can gain almost immortality. It will be like a second life received as a gift. His father flatly refuses, claiming that it can only be passed on to a successor or the demon himself. The young man chuckles, suggesting then to just keep it all a secret. No one will know anything. His father looks at him in surprise, not believing that his son dared to suggest something like that. The guy explains that the defense technique does not manifest itself outwardly. It cannot be seen with the eyes or senses. The father falls silent, realizing he is trapped, but already drawn in too deeply to refuse. The guy says he'll go away to think and give a final answer later, think it over without too much of a rush. His father, not wanting to waste time, demands that he first teach him the 4 steps right away. The boy turns around and is surprised at how easily his father agreed to the deal. Since the conversation has already started, why not really start learning right this minute? The father wonders with a sly smile if the son is afraid he will break his word and not fulfill the condition. The boy looks at him steadfastly, a respect in his eyes that leaves no room for doubt. The father nods in agreement and tells him to begin the explanation immediately. The young man agrees. And the process begins. The pages of the manual are full of ciphers, their gazes silently crossing. And Dad proves he's a freaking natural-born genius, grasping mysteries faster than anyone else. At the same time, we see a spectacular view of the city. The scene looks like a still from a movie. Father, focused to the utmost, controls his aura, and then slowly opens his eyes full of peace. The guy asks if the explanation needs to be repeated in case something was left unclear. Dad confidently replies that he has it all memorized, and literally disappears from where he just stood, as if dissolving into space. The young man looks around in surprise and notices that his father is already applying the first step. His movements are like shadows, light, fluid, almost elusive, as if the air itself obeys him. The guy notices that the style is slightly different from the original, and suggests that this is perhaps a personal interpretation born of the father's intuition. He returns his gaze to the manual, and his father, looking at his palm, quietly acknowledges, the technique is indeed outstanding. Guy realizes, his father is the real leader among the masters, and after the regression, this was the most powerful change. He doubts whether even Magi can overpower such an opponent who has mastered 4 steps. Father confirms that he will now keep his promise and teach defense, but he will only say it once. The guy immediately agrees. But the next scene shows him with a bruise on his forehead. Apparently he's gotten almost nothing out of the explanation. Leon screams with rage, trying to figure out who dared to hit him so hard and brazenly. The guy stops her and tells her that it was his father, and no one would punish him for something like that. She realizes that there is nothing she can do against the boy's father. She has neither the strength nor the rights to do so. A flashback follows. A young man sits in lotus pose, mastering the technique of defending a celestial demon. He exhales deeply, and in that moment he feels, yes, he has indeed understood and mastered this power. He tells his father that they now share a secret, and is happier about it than the technique itself. His father immediately flicks him lightly on the forehead, with a smirk, as if to remind him who's in charge, and tells him not to get cocky before his time, even if the tech is already in his pocket. Maguk asks Leon if she's going to retaliate, and she replies that defending is her way, not attacking. The guy smiles. In her former life, she would never have allowed herself such a joke, or even a smile. He walks past her, softly calling her name. And when she looks up, he admits that he can't do what he has to do yet. She doesn't know what it's about, and it's evident in her face. He promises that he'll be sure to eliminate the side effects of her bodily technique, even if it takes time. They look at each other, and in her gaze you can read real faith, genuine and deep. And, of course, the guy also believes the words spoken, sincerely, without a hint of doubt or lie. Maguk goes on to tell Leon about the words he said to the co-leader. It's time to change things drastically. This place is bound to become one where people will no longer have to sacrifice their bodies to protect others. It must be transformed into a sanctuary where those like her can finally give up imposed roles. The guy smiles at her with surprising warmth, and the girl's eyes read genuine shock and inner turmoil. However, no matter how hard she tried to hide her emotions, it was impossible not to feel a deep respect for the man. Then he walks forward towards her, as if about to start something important and momentous. The man calls out to her, urging her to heed every word that is about to fall from his lips and become fateful. The girl folds her hands in front of her and, straightening up, speaks demurely, ready to listen to orders. The guy looks straight into her eyes and says that as of this moment, she is officially leaving her post as a warrior. She is overwhelmed with shock. She can't believe what she's heard and wonders with trepidation if it's really true. The man confirms she will now be appointed captain of an elite squad of the Shadow Ghost Corps. The girl is confused because she has never heard of the existence of such a unit. The guy continues with a slight smile, explaining that this squad hasn't been created yet. He's just about to do so, and emphasizes that the group will report directly to him and no one else, without regard to his orders. She says in surprise that it comes out that way. She's now captain of a team that doesn't really even exist yet. The man says he wants to hear her decision again, whether she'll become captain of the Shadow Corps for him. The guy gives her the same warm, calm smile again, in which there is hidden trust and hope for her consent. The girl feels a warmth blossom inside and folds her arms honorably, accepting the new order. Later that evening, the crowded bazaar is bustling with activity, voices and footsteps of belated shoppers can be heard everywhere. Maguk stands at the edge of the bustling marketplace, musing aloud what Leon has informed him about the creation of a personal squad. But such an endeavor requires a lot of resources. It's far from an easy undertaking and will require determination. Running a new organization will require an impressive amount of capital, and it has to come from somewhere. And the man decided to take advantage of one incident that happened even before his temporary return back. A voice comes from the crowd. One of the fighters introduces himself as Yang Dang and states that he is in charge of the mission. The assignment is extremely risky, but well paid, and requires extreme focus. He warns that anyone who makes the slightest foolishness or misstep will fall by his hand. The scene before us is Yang Dang addressing Maguk, asking if it is true that he has come on Darian's advice. The guy confirms, and then Yang Dang wonders if his skills can be relied on in a real situation. Maguk suggests just a reality check. If he can hurt him, then let him recognize the force. Yang Dang warns against complacency. In this world, the heads of the complacent roll first. The guy assures that he will follow orders and asks not to worry. All he needs is payment. Yang Dang replies that he will be watching him closely, evaluating every move and every action. Maguk turns his gaze to the side and notices a worried woman with a child, a mother and daughter. Their mission is to bring these two to Nunpin in one piece, for before, in their past lives, they were doomed. The guy is determined to change their fate, because now he has a chance to save those who were lost. He waves to the girl, and she nods slightly in response, as if catching the promise of safety in his gesture. The woman also nods with hope in her eyes, then both get into the carriage that soon touches down. The wheels clattering on the ground, the carriage pulls into the forest, and night falls. As darkness falls, Yang Dang announces that it is time to stop for a night's rest. He tells everyone to eat enough, because no one knows when the next opportunity to eat will come. Some complain about the bland food. It's just jerky, with no flavor or enjoyment. Others suggest just eating it, because it's better to be full than to be left with an empty stomach. Maguk watches and remembers, they were attacked by the exiles. No bodies were ever found. The victims were killed in mysterious ways, and no one has ever figured out exactly what happened that night. The stars in the sky shine especially bright this time, as if foreshadowing something fateful and eerie. Guy hears a cough, sharp, hoarse, and turns around, noticing a man choking on blood. And it's not just one person. Everyone who ate that meat starts choking, dropping dead from an unknown poison. Maguk is seized with shock, his eyes darting around, searching for an explanation for everything that is happening. He hears Yang Dang's voice asking why the guy is still alive and okay. Maguk slowly turns around, realizing that the poison was spiked intentionally by this very person. He replies that he didn't touch anything he was offered. He just refused the food. Yang Dang pulls out his blade then, saying that it would be easier if Maguk died with the others. The guy can't believe it was the commander who poisoned the food to massacre his own. Maguk says this man's life is pathetic, making a living by betraying and killing comrades. Yang Dang laughs, saying that he intends to buy more wine and women after completing this mission. The guy asks if he killed all those people for such base and cheap pleasures. Yang Dang throws a scolding in his direction, telling him to take care of his own life and not interfere in other people's. At this point, someone pronounces that it looks like it's all over now, and it's finale time for everyone. A group of masked men appear in front of them, each looking frighteningly confident. Yang Dang asks anxiously why those arrived early, since this shouldn't have happened. One of them yells for the woman and child to get out of the carriage immediately, or he will burn her. The doors slowly ajar, and mother and daughter, terrified, cautiously step outside. The man says they were good at hiding like rats, and he was told off for not finding them. We learn that his name is Warrior Quan, and a woman with a tremor in her voice asks that at least her daughter be spared. Quan pauses, as if pondering, and says that out of respect for the past, he will let her live. Then suddenly he explodes and yells, asking if she really thought that, calling her vile. He declares that she should have crawled on her knees in front of him instead of playing up her pride and dignity. The girl starts crying loudly. The mother sobs too and offers him 10 times the fee. Quan brusquely waves it off. He doesn't need the money, as her father has already been caught and all is lost. Her heart seemed to stop beating at what she heard, and Quan noticed Maguk standing nearby. He wonders how this guy can calmly wave at them in such a tense situation. Quan turns to Yang Dang to ask who he even is and why he is here. Maguk replies that he has been hired to get the mother and child safely to their destination. Quan clarifies if that means he doesn't obey him, and Yang Dang says he's just a vagrant. Quan tells Yang Dang to deal with this guy, remove him as an unnecessary nuisance. Maguk says they are no better than street thugs, willing to betray even their own leader, and asks if they naively believe they will be paid. Rather, they will be killed and have everything taken away. Quan gets angry at hearing the comparison to mere thugs, and the guy adds that he was actually being polite. Because there's a kid standing next to me, and he doesn't want to say anything worse, out of respect for the innocent. Quan calls him a madman and asks how on earth this beggar dares to speak to him so boldly. Maguk says the man freaked out because he hit him hard, getting right to the point. Quan loses patience and orders his men to kill Maguk first, without delay. Guy points at Yin Dang, adding that since he said it first, that means you're next on the list. Yang Dang is in a daze. He turns around machine, as if trying to figure out if this is all real. At that moment, the throwing weapon stabbed right into the back of his head, and his eyes rolled up. We see Yang Dang die from Quan's punch. It all happens swiftly, with almost no sound. Quan states that the idiot trusted him too much, and he was untrustworthy from the start. Maguk looks at Yin Dang's body, a shadow of regret and bitter irony in his gaze. And he says this is how those who sell out others for money and their own gain always end up. Quan throws a question to his underlings with irritation. Will they really keep listening to this bastard? And those do not hesitate to launch an attack, reacting to the fury in the leader's voice. Maguk, with a slight chuckle, asks the woman to cover the child's eyes and ears, hiding the cruelty of the world from him. She obeys without further ado, covering not only the child's face but her own eyes as if sensing the impending carnage. When three big men rush forward to send a stranger straight to hell, Maguk meets their blades with the grace of a deadly technique, the 4 steps of death, which puts Quan in a stupor, because in just a blink of an eye, the stranger is right in front of his face, shattering logic. Quan is yelling in panic, trying to realize how this guy got so close and where his fighters have gone. Turns around and watches in horror as the heads of his men float in the air without touching the ground. A man who just seemed ordinary turns out to be a monster capable of the unimaginable. Bodies fall, the woman is in shock, and Quan, stunned, tries to figure out who this killer is. To which Maguk nonchalantly makes it clear that the question is not to him, but to Quan himself, who he is in the first place. The woman finally dares to speak and explains that Quan is a vassal of her clan, and she herself is the heiress of the Golden Estate and goes by the name of Gim Sayan, the daughter of its owner. Maguk explains that it was because of her situation that he hid his face, pretending to be a traveling mercenary. Her father is Gimasu, one of the richest merchants in the Central Plains and head of the influential Golden Estate. He was once betrayed by the vassals he trusted most and ended up dying himself, along with his wife and daughter. Quan begins to realize that the guy is ignoring him and sees this as an opportunity to deliver a crushing blow. He draws his sword and prepares to attack, figuring he can still change the course of the battle. Quan slowly swings his sword, hoping to take his opponent by surprise and secure his victory. But Maguk effortlessly blocks the blow without even turning his head, as if he knew about it beforehand. Quan's eyes widen, his vision blurs, and he realizes that his decapitated body is standing behind his enemy. The guy proved to be incredibly fast, leaving his enemy with only one thing, the realization of his own demise. Quan's head rolls on the ground, and Cyan presses her palms to her lips in shock. While Maguk nonchalantly notes that the scum always burrow to hit him from behind when he turns his back. Cyan, stunned by what she sees, says she needs someone like this, begging for help for her and her family. Maguk replies that times have changed and his services now cost considerably more than before. She vows, without hesitation, to pay any price so long as he saves her father from the clutches of traitors. The guy just chuckles. It's okay, he'll figure it out. At this time, a fat type appears on the stage, bursting into laughter, claiming that they finally managed to catch these two and the 10-year plan worked as it should. However, he immediately loses his composure when he sees Maguk in front of him, who steps forward with a cold stare. The guy wonders where Quan is and declares that everyone but him is already dead. The well-fed traitor asks in horror who exactly killed Quan, unable to believe what is happening. Mangak calmly states that it was a young, handsome man, a martial artist whose strength surpassed everyone else. The fat man is dumbfounded. Why is this guy praising his enemy? He squints, and suddenly it comes to him. Mangak is talking about himself, and then he exclaims indignantly that this is just pathetic self-praise in front of everyone. The traitor admits that he has an innate instinct for talented people. The fat man signals to his fighters, who surround Mangak in a tight ring. He points out that since this guy saved the woman and child, he should have escaped, not returned to the tiger's den. Mangak only laughs, saying that there is no tiger here. In front of him are only cowardly mutts that betrayed the master who raised and fed them. Saiyan trembles with fear, sensing the outcome of the battle. And the traitor can't yet figure out what to expect from this cold and dangerous man. This guy destroyed Quan, but instead of disappearing, he came straight into the enemy's lair. Despite his surroundings, you can read absolute confidence in his gaze. He knows what he's doing. The fat man folds his arms respectfully, offers to give his name, and even offers a drink despite the setting. Mangak coldly replies that politeness is no reason to hope for mercy, and letting him lick his ass all he wants won't change anything. The fat man quickly realizes that persuasion won't work. And with fury, he orders his underlings to kill him right now. Those with shouts rush into the fray, surrounding Mangak. The guy decides in the same second that this is the moment to act, and grips the hilt of his sword tightly. He rushes forward, leaving a trail of wind behind him, and chops one in half in one motion. The fighters finally realize that the man in front of them is not a man, but a hurricane. But it's too late. One of them loses his head before he can even swing his sword. Mangak abruptly changes position, strikes again, and blows another head off in a bloody whirlwind. He continues his deadly dance, using the 4 steps of the wind god, destroying opponents one by one. His opponents don't even have time to raise their weapons, so fast and precise are his movements. Saiyan still covers her daughter's eyes, not allowing her to see the horrors of what is happening. And the fat man realizes with horror that he's not facing a human being, and with the living embodiment of punishment standing in the center of a pile of bodies. He gasps in fear and whispers, "Who is this guy who can't be stopped?" Mangak nonchalantly says he's nobody, just a mercenary who came for the smell of big money. The fat man tries to buy it, claiming to have a fortune that can change any fate. The guy only chuckles and asks why he would do that. After all, if he wanted to change his life, he would have done it himself, not stealing someone else's, especially from someone who once considered him his own man. The fat man starts biting his lip with anger and fear, and suddenly there is a shriek. Someone demands to drop the sword. The fat man turns around, not realizing who dared to interrupt him, and sees a certain ugly type holding Ah-Su, Saiyan's father, hostage. The woman calls out to her father in desperation, her voice shaking with terror. And the traitor smiles gloatingly, threatening, "One more step, and the master of the Golden Estate will be dead." Mangak raises his sword and takes an upward swing. And at first it seems like nothing happened. But in the next instant, the ground is torn up. The shockwave blasts its way all the way to the hostage, leaving no chance of escape. For the first few seconds, everyone is in a stupor, not realizing what just happened. But the hostage is already dead. It's just that his body hasn't realized his death yet. Mangak applied the ascending sword art, the 4th form, Blazing Heavens. The fat man starts screaming hysterically, not believing what is happening in front of his eyes. The boy, however, looks at him with a slight shadow of disappointment. And, as if mockingly, asks again, "So what were you saying a few seconds ago?" Lardos takes a step back on a level of pure instinct, recoiling in fear at the Mangak's face, and raises his hands in a gesture of pleading, as if trying to buy at least a little time, clinging to a fragile hope. Mangak is completely unmoved by this plea. If an opponent seeks a dignified death, let him fight and die. Lardo's face is covered in sweat. He realizes, since Mangak used a strong technique, he's almost completely exhausted. With a feint, the guy snatches up the blade, deciding to strike first to seize the opportunity. Man blocks the lunge with apparent ease. But even though it's a block, the power of the blow is so great that his palms begin to bleed. He slides his sword to the side, causing his opponent's weapon to crash to the ground with a clatter. Lardos declares that he will now gather the rest of his force and end the battle, leaving nothing untold. He inhales deeply, gathering energy in his body, and takes a sweeping swing of his blade forward. The man raises his sword again, taking the blow, not allowing the attacks to break through. Lardos brings the blade down with a scream. The impact is so fierce that the ground beneath him shakes and cracks with power. The power hidden in that corpulent body turns out to be real, though hidden from view. He continues to methodically attack the man, and with a mocking smirk asks if the enemy has already run out of strength and has nothing left. After all, the man's hands are busy defending himself. Everything goes into reflecting furious lunges without pause. The guy feels it is worth a little more pressure, and the victory will definitely lean on his side, he is almost sure. But suddenly there is a sharp pain in his chest. He lowers his eyes and sees a blade sticking out. The man calls him a pathetic creature worthy of contempt and declares, "You should have practiced. Not burned through years of murder, betrayal, and the pursuit of money, for he was none other than the head of the Golden Court Guard. Death by sword in this case is the best possible ending for a filthy pig who lives by greed." He yanks the blade out with a slight effort and says that maybe in the next life the guy will be lucky enough to become a merchant. Siga changes and Asu bows his head in gratitude, saying he will never forget the help he gave. After all, this man was the savior of their family, pulling them back from the brink of destruction, and asks for his name. But the traveler replies that he is just a wandering swordsman passing by chance. Asu chuckles, saying that even the king of the wanderers wouldn't be able to deal with opponents so easily. The man calmly says he's being flattered. Insane reminds him that she once promised to reward him for his help. Insu claims that her action was the right decision and they will keep their word for sure. If a man is only interested in money, he has come to the right place. Here you will find everything you need. Maguk chuckles, saying that's the reason he agreed to be in this mess in the first place. Insu says he deserves a fortune for saving their lives, but giving it all away is, alas, impossible. The man says he didn't ask for an excessive amount, he just wants a reasonable amount. To which Asu suggests, let him decide what to take, or just take whatever he can carry. The man asks if the man is sure of the offer, if there's a catch lurking. Insu only adds that using cards and calling for help is not allowed, but using internal force is. The man notices that he will then be able to carry extremely much and will take that chance. Insu agrees. Without him, they'd be long gone, and that's the least they can offer for salvation. Maguk is left satisfied that all the effort has paid off, and he thanks the landlord for the opportunity, for this chance. Asu swings the gate open, and as the heavy flaps move aside, the man takes the first step into the deep end. His figure gradually dissolves into the thickening darkness, until it disappears completely. Sane and her father stand side by side, watching the darkness engulf the guest. And Sane, looking at the receding man, says that with such skills, he will be able to carry much more than he looks. The father agrees. The treasure is nothing compared to the fact that this guy saved their lives. And for him, the most valuable thing is the fact that his daughter and granddaughter are alive and unharmed. She glows with happiness seeing her father's concern. And I'm convinced, this man is definitely not an ordinary man. There is something special about him. Sane says he seems to be hiding his true level, but his skill is amazing. And Sue notes that it's not just about technique at all. There's a strength in the man that can't be put into words. Though he had seen a great many people in his life, he had never met the likes of Magoku until now. Money is a transient thing. It can be earned again, but to establish a connection with such a person is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and it is foolish to refuse it. Even if he took most of the treasure, it would only make the bond stronger. It was the more he took, the stronger their future bond would be, unshakable and enduring. Sane agrees with her father and looks away, wanting to see what the man will come back out with. The scene changes smoothly. Maguk walks down the spacious hall. The heavenly demon pavilion spread out before him, glittering with myriad treasures and gold. He tells how he sold off the looted valuables to different cities, to shops and markets. One location wasn't enough, so he sold jewelry in every available city. The guy walked away with a mountain of gold and ended up with 38 million Myung, starting his business. These funds would become the cornerstone of his own squad, reporting solely to him. He approaches the throne room where his father is sitting, and we see him with Myung standing nearby. Their gazes cross, filled with silent tension. And Maguk says his father gets reports from Myung several times a day, making crucial decisions. Lots of people's lives depend on these decisions. Some will go on living, and some will be doomed. And he involuntarily wonders if his father is satisfied with this fate, if he wants to change. Perhaps, like himself, the man wishes to give up the title of heavenly demon and leave to live a simple and peaceful life. The first to break the silence is the father, saying he heard. His son has gone out into the world, and Mangak calmly replies that he's gone to get money. The father is surprised. Why does he even need money when he is his son? Mangak says he can't rely on his riches forever, as he will need large sums of money. His father asks what such sums are for, and Mangak replies, to start his own independent band. This startles both father and Ginyong, and they demand an explanation. Mangak tells us that each high demon has his own men, and to balance that power, he needs his own personal fighting unit. His father sharply states that this can't be allowed. If Mangak creates a squad, his brother will want to create two. The family would be divided, the cult would lose its integrity, and he absolutely forbids the endeavor. The man had expected resistance and was prepared for his idea to cause immediate rejection. He pulls out some sort of object from under his cloak, saying it's meant for his father personally. Father and Ginyong watch with interest at what is happening, and the father reaches out, using force to draw the mysterious bundle to himself. He unwraps it and asks in amazement why such a huge amount of money is needed, and Mangak replies, it's change. It is only pocket money collected by him personally. The father's face frowns and he shouts angrily at his son, not understanding his behavior. The man only smiles quietly. And Ginyong feels the tension, anxiously watching their conversation. The father sinks into reflection, claiming he already has untold riches enough to last for dozens of generations. Mangak admits he knows his father is the richest man in the world. And he adds, it's his first gift as a son, a thank you for his life and upbringing. It's hard to know what emotions are really bubbling up inside the father. But Mangak admits he's long wanted to do at least that, to give him some rest and peace. After which he turns around, getting ready to leave. Father looks down at the bundle as if assessing the weight of the gesture, and Ginyong doesn't take his eyes off it either. And now it's clear, the man is genuinely glad that his son turned out this way. And Ginyong had never imagined that he was capable of such a warm and human emotion.